it is now 7 a.m. Oh, I'm already messed up.
It's 7 p.m.
Test.
It's
Yeah,
working.
it's working, sorry.
Would you like one of these?
No,
Oh.
oh, it's good. All right, according to my devices, it is 7 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a Town of Lunenburg Charter Review Committee meeting. We're meeting on Wednesday, January 9th, 2019, 7 p.m. at the Lunenburg Middle High School Collaborative Room. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live, actually, over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And now we do
Minutes?
the minutes. So, we have in front of us the minutes for October 28th. 24th. You're right, it says 24 right here. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, I'd entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes of October 24th.
Second.
What is it? Can you hear it out
One
there?
thing I noticed, was this the meeting that Gary Massey was at? Was that the one?
That was the other one.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
He's not mentioned as being there.
He is in the other one.
Yeah.
The December.
Oh, but I mean, is,
Yeah.
you know, like where it says, present Katie Adams, Dave Bassios. He's not mentioned as being present.
He wasn't there at the beginning of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Later. I forgot to record it. I'm not going to record all the people that are here this evening either.
Oh, yeah, well, I was just surprised that you had listed two of the people that were there.
But his name is in the minutes.
Yes.
No, I have to, I'll entertain a motion to accept.
We already did that. We did a motion and we did a
Jamie
second.
seconded it.
I missed that one.
That's okay.
All right, any more discussion?
No, they look great.
So, with that, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? So, the 24th minutes are in. Could we please look at the December 12th minutes?
I reviewed those as well, and those looked good to me, so I'm making a motion to accept the minutes of December 12th.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. At this time, I'm going to begin, the process here is to have a public open hearing on the charter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a brief charter report. I'll ask for comments from the committee. I will then read some of the written comments that were sent to me. I will then ask for public comments, and then I will close the public comment period. All right, so at this point, turn my page. The Charter Review Committee is holding a public hearing today, and it's being posted on YouTube by the Lunenburg Access channel. The proposed changes that we're going to discuss, or that I have placed here, are change the name of the Board of Selectmen to Select Board. 2, change the manner of selection of the town clerk from elected to appointed by the town manager, subject to ratification by the Board of Selectmen. Providing for a second annual town meeting in the fall, the time and date of which to be set by bylaw. 4, providing that persons appointed to town committees only be residents in town. 5, providing that conduct of town meeting to be governed by town meeting time. 6, clarify and confirm the appointment powers of the Board of Selectmen and town manager to provide for appointment of various department heads appointed by the town manager, subject to ratification by the Board of Selectmen. 7, clarifying the duties of the town manager relating to personnel management, jurisdiction over town facilities, property and day-to-day operations, the budget process, and enforcement of charter provisions and town bylaws. 8, providing more specifics in the process for removal and suspension of the town manager. 9, make certain other grammatical and phrasing changes that do not alter the meaning or intent of existing provisions, as well as updating requirements of the open meeting law to comply with state law. 10, clarify all references to days to refer to standard calendar days unless otherwise specified. 11, change all references to months to its equivalent of 30 days. At this point, are there any committee members who would like to bring something up? I recognize Phyllis.
Microphone, please.
Oh,
Is it ready? This list doesn't include...
it's not on.
No, turn it on.
Press the on button, or use the blue one, it's going to be better. I think.
Well, it looks better. Thank you.
Is it on?
I don't know, is it on?
Speak loud then, if you...
All right. Section 7.1, elections, that's omitted from this list.
Yes, it should be. The reason why it should be is that it has not yet been voted to bring forward. It did not pass supermajority at the time of the vote to incorporate it, so it can still be discussed as part of the public comment section of the meeting. But because we didn't have, we didn't have a full committee the night that it was brought to vote, that it did not have a sufficient number of votes to bring it forward as a change. So that's why it's not there. The other thing I wanted to say about the residents, we did change the language as to the finance committee being a registered voter of the town. And then there was a question about whether we should have all committee members be registered voters as well. The determination was made to vote to have that just be a resident of the town. The reason why we singled out the Finance Committee was because of the role of the Finance Committee as part of the town meeting government to basically make those recommendations. So that's, and I think there was a brief discussion about whether or not there was an issue with, like they're not 18, or they could be somebody, if we don't say they're 18 or over, I'm not sure it matters. If somebody has a talent bank form and it's an appropriate committee for them to maybe be 17, we can leave it or not. It's up to people to discuss. We did not clean that up. So that's something that we can hear about tonight, or if people want to discuss it further in our next meetings, we can do that as well. But that was why that one didn't make it to that list.
Okay,
in
thanks for
particular.
clarifying.
Okay.
Jim?
You're holding the mic, so.
No, I was
trying to figure out how to get
why
it
it
free.
was, well, it was flashing for a while. Now it seems to be.
Is it green?
No, it's flashing between red and amber.
Am I loud enough that I don't need a mic?
You're doing good.
Thank you.
Your mother had no trouble hearing you. What?
It's okay.
That's not
It's
on.
okay. We'll just move
All right, we'll talk loudly. Sorry about that. Okay, are there any other committee members with a comment? I did receive several comments by email. If I may, Jim, one was from you about moving some things around. So I thought I would just,
The placement.
yes, I thought I'd just say that so that it was, it's discussable. I reformatted the document, added numbers as you can see, and changed some of the spacing to make it easier to work on as a group. Jim corrected some of my math. I did not change some of the months, 30 days, correctly. Thank you for that, Jim. He also is mentioning in line 5 and 15, should state the same name. I believe it says charter or X-wise. Flow-wise, should we move the definitions to 1.3 and from 1.7 so that things are defined beforehand? We will go over this, and I'm just reading these in. 107 is wondering if we should make that a subsection because it's talking about financing. And line 210, if the town clerk is appointed, we need to revisit this language because there's absolutely no language at the moment in the document for an appointed town clerk. It's only for an elected town clerk. So that's a whole other area. So thank you for those, Jim. We'll get to those discussions. Tim Murphy, our town moderator, had sent me 2 comments. Under definitions, he was wondering why, when we said days, should it say excluding weekends and holidays, or was that intentionally omitted? That was an intentional omitted. We decided to just make it days and avoid all confusion. So, he also says that in line 572, it refers to a list, and we should probably change it to name or name. So we will look at that in a minute. I also got an email from the cemetery department, Bill, right here, asking us to, on 42I, to insert after the Conservation Commission and the Cemetery Commission. So we'll bring that up today, hopefully, also. Those were all of the written things that I did receive over the last month. So at this point, seeing no other comments from the committee, I would like to open up for public comments. Please make sure you clearly state your name and address. We are being broadcast live. That microphone, if you press the power button, it should turn on. Yep. So just tap it.
Say hi here. Just say hi.
Hi.
No?
Wow.
I heard it.
Oh, it's on.
It's on, it is on. All right, takes a second. All right, that's good. All right, so at this point, is there anyone here who has a public comment they would like to make? Do I say this? The chair recognizes... No, you... oh, thanks, Nancy.
I'm Clarence Floyd, 720 Goodrich Street, and my thought has always been on the town clerk, and we've been hearing this for a lot of years now, that the Board of Selectmen wanted to appoint that person. I personally think that we should leave that up to the citizens of the town and have it voted on at an annual meeting. I believe that we deserved to let them have their say. When it comes to the Board of Selectmen, the title, I don't see any reason to change it myself. That's about all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you very much. Is there someone else, public comment?
I have one question. Is this the only time the public will be able to comment?
No. Oh, during this meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Yes, unless we're in a conversation where I deem we need more information. I believe that's allowed.
Mr. Chairman,
Is that correct? Yes. I recognize...
my name is Dave Rogers. I live at 82 Highland Street. Are we limited here, as the school committee limits, for 3 minutes for public comment?
No.
So this is the only time that we'll be able to talk during this?
No.
So I
am going to close public comments at the end of this so we can begin deliberating. If someone in the audience would like to add to the conversation, I think I've done that at past meetings, that yes, it was fine as long as it didn't take 10 minutes.
Well,
It's as we go through item by item, you'll probably recognize people who might have comments on those.
I am going to be
items.
recognizing people who have
well, that's
specific
good,
comments.
because that's the whole point that I understood this evening was to have us talk about.
Correct.
And
Right
react,
now,
Yes.
excuse me,
No, right now,
talk to and react to that which you are presenting. So, I mean, if that's not the case, then we need a different format.
right now I'm looking at what topics are to be discussed, because at public comments, we can bring up topics that are not on the agenda. So I will be allowing discussion and public comments for each thing as I, right?
So people just raise their hand if
Right,
they want
and I will
to speak?
recognize them.
Okay, great.
All right, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. So I'll talk about the 2 things that I said.
Your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 97 Island Road, here in beautiful Lunenburg. So the 2 things that I mentioned in my last email to the committee, I think you should define day and days. So if you're going to say including weekends or excluding weekends, but say it one way or the other. So when I read it, and I know I've got 3 days to respond or 5 days to respond, I need to know by reading it
Oh.
whether it says 3 days including weekends, or 3 days excluding weekends, just so I'll know. Because if it just says days, then the first comment you're gonna get from people, well, do you mean weekends count or don't count?
Right.
So just say it.
Is 3 calendar days not sufficient?
It does say refer to standard calendar days.
Okay, so 3 calendar days.
Yeah.
Just so the language is clear that you're including or excluding or whatever. So if it says 3 calendar days, then calendar days includes weekends.
Okay.
So that would be fine.
So
Yeah,
will they have to say that every time, or just like at the beginning?
Just
In the definition?
in the definitions.
Okay.
And the other thing I brought up was a list. So I'm chairman of the committee when we interview and find a town manager. And years ago, some of you have been around for a while, will remember that the search committee submitted one name from after they'd done all their interviewing, and the selectmen sent it back and said, that's not a list. A list requires more than one name. So they went back and forth, and it was before my time, but they went back and forth on the list. And my thought was that if the search committee has gone through its work, and they've weeded through, and they've only got one person, well, that might be a great person, and it shouldn't be rejected because somebody said, well, that's not a list. So I would just say that the search committee should submit name or names, parentheses, and that issue, which was probably bizarre anyways, wouldn't come up again.
But if the search committee only submits one name, then they're choosing the town manager.
No, because the selectmen will reject the name, or hire the name. So, but I mean, if I was the search committee this last time, and, you know, we had so many people we interviewed, then we weaned it down to so many people, and then 1 or 2 of the people said, no, I'm not interested. We still had a couple, but theoretically, we couldn't have got down to 1. But it doesn't mean that we've selected it. We've said, here's a qualified candidate from our experience in our interviewing, and if you like that person, hire, and if you don't like that person, send it back.
Any other public comments, please? Okay, yeah, well, no, Mr. Luck was first, so, all right.
I get the mic anyway. Bill Tyler, 5 Grand Street, also a member of the Lunenburg Cemetery Commission. The Lunenburg Cemetery Commission has submitted 2 changes to the Charter Review Committee. The first, which could be called non-substantive, involves adding the word "sole" to the first line of Section 3.5B, Powers and Duties. This change is to try and get the language of the current charter to align with Mass General Laws, Chapter 114, Section 23, Powers and Duties, which reads, "Said board shall have the sole care, superintendence, and management of all public burial grounds in this town." The second change submitted is probably going to be considered substantive, in that it involves a change to the powers and duties of the town manager, Section 4-2I, which currently reads, "To have full jurisdictions over the rental and use of all town facilities and property, except property under the control of the school committee, the library trustees, and the conservation commission." We would like the cemetery commission added to this group. We want to make it clear that this change only involves usage of any current and future buildings within the confines of north and south cemeteries. Lunenburg is growing by leaps and bounds, and future growth is a subject that we are very concerned with as it applies to the town cemeteries. We are in the process of building a garage storage facility at North Cemetery where the former building was. This project is self-funded, requiring no tax dollars to construct. There are supplies and other materials involved in the cemetery department that need a dry, secure place to be stored. Winter storage of seasonal cemetery equipment can also be stored there. Another concern is that when it's time for residents to purchase a burial plot, more often than not, it's at a very difficult time in their lives, usually dealing with the loss of a loved one. Currently, there's no place at either cemetery that is available to conduct this business. Sometimes these meetings are after regular hours and on weekends. The superintendent meets with these people at their convenience, which is actually as it should be. We want to have a small area in this facility for this purpose also. In conclusion, this change is simply a way to ensure that this land and building are used for cemetery purposes, as is spelled out in the deed of April 9, 1935, which reads, "This conveyance is a gift for public purposes and is made to the restriction and on the condition that the granted premises will be used by the grantee only for public purposes connected with a cemetery department, but shall not be used for burial purposes. In addition, the town meeting of 10/22/1935, Article 7 also states the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Carl, like 50 Sunset Lane. First, I would, is the document that's on the website at the moment, is that the current state of
It
the
is
document?
supposed to be, when I've checked it, it matches what I have. Once again, we transitioned to a new format, so I did not read every word, but I took the document that was there, added spacing. All I added was spacing. I added numbers on the side. I made the changes we voted on at the last meeting, days, months, adding in definitions, those kind of things, and that's it. So anything from prior versions that were there that we did not change because of a vote at our last meeting should still be there.
Good, thank you. In process, I'm just a little confused. You said that there'll be opportunity to discuss things during your discussion after the hearing's closed that are on the agenda. And does that mean only the list of things that you said?
No, actually, I've been writing down what everyone is saying, because once you say it in the public hearing, I can include it in the agenda, even though it's not published on the agenda, which is why I'm doing it this way, because any concern anyone has about anything, I want to make sure that it's on an agenda so that we can discuss it. Now, as was mentioned to me earlier, the parking lot lights go out at 10 o'clock. So there is a definite limit.
These like.
But I'm writing all of these down so that even if we don't get to it today, which I'm hoping we get to everything listed here plus the comments, at least getting feedback from the committee and asking for feedback from the people who are so interested, so that over our next 2 meetings, we can deliberate and hopefully vote so that at the next public hearing, February 27th, we can finalize. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's the process. I just
The
wanted to-
process, yeah. I'm new at
Whether
this
it makes sense or
process.
not,
I'm very new at this process, so forgive me if I meander.
No, it's good. No, it's good so far. So I assume from the prior comment that the write-in vote is now on the agenda? Or is it, or do I need to ask Pat to put it on? Well, it's one of the potential changes that's in the...
It's in the document.
But it should
Phyllis?
be, yeah. That was, the problem was the night that you guys were missing.
We were not there. We had a.
We didn't have a
quorum, yeah. Not a
super
quorum.
quorum
Super
vote on that particular item, so we never voted to include it,
The specific language.
the whole
The
thing.
whole thing.
The whole thing.
concept.
So tonight, we need to discuss,
Right.
and then either if we decide tonight or at our next meeting to keep it in, keep it out, clean it up, or whatever. But you emailed me about it, so I believe the way to get it on the agenda, because it wasn't on the public hearing notice, was to read your comment asking about it, or ask you to make a comment. I don't want to miss anything,
Right.
so.
So,
Ma'am,
so I
go.
understand, so we'll discuss it later. after
It
the
is
hearing's
listed
closed.
in my list of things to talk about as soon as the public hearing is.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that if a member of the public has comments with regard to that potential change, they should go ahead and speak up.
Yeah.
And that gets it on the record.
Okay.
Well, if it's going to be discussed later by your commission,
Not
I'd rather...
currently on the agenda.
It's not us that would discuss it, it would be someone from the public. So it would be a public comment from the public or from the committee. So go ahead and bring it up.
Go, yeah, okay. Because I'm just really not used to this format for hearing, where all of the
Neither am I.
discussion is later, after the hearing's closed. It's a little uncomfortable.
Okay,
That's why it's your rules.
Actually, this is the same format we used last year at the last public hearing before town meeting, because I copied it from Bob's, because I didn't know what the format was. So I'm going to write that down to check the process.
So I'll go. I'll go with it. 'Cause I
But
didn't
maybe
like-
it would be helpful if they put that up, so everybody could see it.
Well, I'm going to, as soon as this, we get through this, every one of these points I'm going to bring up, and we're going to at least look at and see specifically, and I'm going to say, Mr. Murphy, is this the line you're talking about? Is this the word you're, and then I'm going to ask you. That's why I want to hear from you right now. The issue with yours is we haven't officially begun discussing it yet, because we did not have a super majority at that meeting. So we're still
But
very
it
much in
was
discussion.
included in the draft
That Bob sent, yes.
that
So-
was on the website.
Right.
So I think it is included in the agenda because the agenda says public hearing on draft charter, and it was in the draft charter.
So when I would, we will discuss it, but we're definitely not going to vote on it today,
Yeah.
because we haven't had enough time to discuss it.
Yeah,
Do you have
that's
comments
okay.
about that since?
Well, I want to be part of the discussion, because you had a really good discussion at the last meeting that I watched, a lot of good points, and a lot of good questions, so
All right.
I'm not comfortable just trying to answer your questions as I recall your questions. I'd rather have a
So-
discussion.
It's been brought up, it will be referred to as we go through.
Great, thank you.
All right.
And the last procedural question. I've been following this for a while. I understand where the supermajority concept came from because of the belief that by the commission that the town was going to vote up or down. And the fear was that some issues that are a little thorny might create a down vote. So my recollection was that you invented the concept of things that we put in a red category now, I believe is the red category, require a super majority vote to go be presented to town. But that's now all changed. The town can vote and remove any one of these, can vote up and down on any one as the town meeting goes. Is that still correct?
The town can vote, when we do our warrant, we are going to present various versions and subversions that the town can vote. We are going to continue to use the supermajority vote for every item to make sure that the board is overwhelmingly agreeing to whatever changes or additions are there. I think that is very important.
For every item?
That's going
Every
to
change?
We've already done, there's been, all the brown is already, actually, all the brown is already, except for one thing, I think has already been supermajority by unanimous votes.
Okay.
So, let me finish. So, the red, so like the brown, let me get this, the brown is basic changes, typographical. Brown is some substantial changes, but not very controversial. We are still using the supermajority, and I believe, if it goes according to plan, we will present the charter as a purple version with just typographical and basic changes. If that passes, then we would ask, I'm not sure the order, but then for the brown, anyone who has comment on the brown, and then the red would be, or we might do it backwards, we might do the red first.
The red was going to be individual.
Red is individual. We will identify at the next hearing the 5 red things. These are 5 red things, and they will be separate. Purple and brown are going to be taken all at once at town meeting. Whatever order we do so that it works logically. I haven't looked that far in advance. I haven't gotten legal counsel on how that works. But the idea is, when we leave town meeting, that we will have a version of the charter that we can send to the legislature for approval. It may be the brown version, which just updates certain things, I mean, to meet today. I'm sorry, purple, which just updates, I apologize. I should read this. Brown, which there are some changes. We've decided to move the furniture around in the house, and the living room is now going to be a bedroom kind of thing. And then the controversial ones where we've decided to remove the porch and put in a swing set and a slide, a 40-foot slide. You know what I mean? That is like, whoa, does that even meet zoning requirements? Does that make sense? And I'm trying to make this as simple as I can for me to understand, because I'm not an expert on all of these things. So between now and then, what the hope is at the February public hearing, we will hear from the public, we will make our final deliberations, create the warrant, and have the actual order of how we're voting on the different things. But the goal is to give the public a purple version, a brown version, and each red you can vote on.
Each red separate.
Each red separately. And some of the red may make it into town meeting, some may not make it into town meeting. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
The
Yes.
board may decide that the issue, for whatever reason, doesn't merit going all the way. I
So,
don't know if that'll happen, but we're in the public now, so.
I appreciate, now I understand that, thank you. It makes me more wonder why, since the red is going to be individual in town, why the need for a supermajority
And everything else?
on the red team?
Oh,
Anything
oh.
goes to town.
Well, if you look at it this way, if it's almost a tie vote, we're 9. If it's 5-4, then that's, are we going to change it? We don't know. If we decide,
Are you going to present it to the town, is the question?
all reds will be presented to the town,
Oh.
and then at the town, all
No,
I said that
to the
wrong.
town unless there's a supermajority.
we may decide to exclude a red, and that at public meetings, people can then give their discussion. If the board decides, I can't even think of a red.
Let me go.
Yes,
as a-
I need
yeah.
help here.
Going in the way back, one of the first questions that was brought to the Charter Commission as a potential change was going to representative town meeting instead of regular town meeting. And the determination was made at that time that until we spent some time trying to gin up more support for attendance at town meeting, we didn't want to go to representative town meeting. That didn't make the cut. We didn't have a supermajority vote to go to representative town meeting or bring that question forward.
Thank you, that's a great example. Those are things, we've actually already,
So
Past
just to be clear,
things.
though, the current process is you will not bring a red article to the town unless it has a supermajority vote.
That's the current process.
because that is such a substantial change, and if we feel as a board, it needs to be debated by the town, we want to bring it up for the town. Oh, wait, am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, that sounds upside down.
I'm saying it wrong.
Right.
Someone help me out here.
Because it feels like, if it's a substantive change and you want the town to be able to discuss it, then you shouldn't require a supermajority
Correct.
in your board.
It may be that, well, and then we can revisit it and discuss it at another time, that maybe the supermajority vote makes a determination as to whether we as a board make a recommendation.
That's what I was
Okay,
trying to get
that
to.
would make sense.
So we would not
I-
recommend.
You know what, as we were
change.
talking, I'm going, there's a reason why we need to, the finance committee does it, the select
So
do it.
it may
It would-
appear on the warrant, but
There
you are not
it would be
recommending it.
there would be no recommendation to approve.
And the moderator would then say, what does the committee say? And
Alright.
say, we've voted it down, we voted it
We
up.
have not made that change.
No.
But that would be something that would be worth discussing at a regular meeting, to say, what do we want to do? The other issue we had with changing the supermajority was we had significant change in the membership of the committee, and we haven't had enough people at the meeting to change the function of the supermajority, is my understanding. I could be wrong.
Well, and as I am understanding it as well, the example that you gave, a supermajority voted not to include that in the draft,
Right.
yet these controversial changes, a supermajority voted to include them in the draft and let the voters decide.
Right.
Right. So we've already had that vote. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, Katie Adams, Williams Drive, former member of the Charter Review Committee, speaking as a citizen. As we talk about change, I always like to think with the charter, it's like a constitution, and it doesn't have to be changed. One option every time we review it is to leave things the same, and if something is broken, we should know it. And if we're not highly aware there's a problem, then maybe things don't change. And so when I hear an emphasis on change, I like to just bring it back to the fact that one option every 10 years when we review it is to basically leave it alone.
And if I may, that would be the purple. That's basically the purple with the other. Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Chairman, let me tell you what I thought would happen tonight, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I thought we would go through this recommended change of the charter, and it would be an opportunity for the public to come forth and to give you their opinion of the changes and anything else in the charter. And you folks would then take that which is submitted from the citizenry and act on it or not act on it.
And you are correct.
Okay, so,
My understanding of the public comments, maybe I'm misinterpreting that. This was the area, if something was not on the agenda, this is when it could be included in public comments. Am I getting this wrong?
We can actually start to scroll if you feel like.
You know what I'd like to do, if it's okay? Well,
Yes.
I would like to begin going through every one of these that you've mentioned and showing you it and discussing it so that we can discuss each of these items.
okay, and if there's something in the
And
body
then I'm
of
going to ask for opinions, yes.
and if there's something in the body of the charter that hasn't been touched, we still have the opportunity to make a comment on it.
I will, yes, I will allow that. Yes.
I would hope so.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
why I'm here.
we're trying to
So, I'm trying to get this so that we can get to the document. and
Well,
talk
let's
about the
do that, but I don't want to feel that that's some kind of courtesy that you're giving to people. This is what we're talking about. So let's go on and we'll
All right.
go through it.
So, at this point, I'm closing the generic public comments.
Actually, you're not.
I'm
You're
not.
really not. We're just, this is the public hearing portion.
Okay, I've been getting all kinds of advice, so it's still open. So, at this point, does anyone have the change of name from Board of Selectmen to Select Board? That's the first thing.
And the first time that that's going to appear is going to be on the very
Scroll it,
first
scroll
page,
it.
under section
Scroll it.
1.4.
And it happens all over the document, but it's right there.
I guess I have a question.
Yep.
What's the cost to the town?
Nothing.
That's on.
What would happen is when, if I get this correct, my years at the school department, when the stationery runs out and they order new ones, they would just change the name. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, all right.
So I have two reams of things that say Board of Selectmen, we change it to Select Board. When the reams run out, you just, that's my understanding. I could be wrong. I'm getting looks from
I don't know.
Heather.
Heather, what do you think?
We don't have pre-printed stationery.
Isn't it just on the computer, you just change it on the computer and it just prints out?
Pre-printed envelopes.
So,
But, so by the time the charter is get through by the legislature, we probably run out of accepting stuff.
Okay, great.
yeah, it's my feeling that stationery and all that, you just use it till it runs out. But then it's just going through whatever time it takes to go through the website.
That's really old
Good stuff.
school. We don't do that stuff.
Do
you have to go through documents
Get the gentleman
and
the
things?
microphone.
Or do
All right.
you
I
just,
didn't realize you
okay,
did
so just going forward, you just change the name, you don't have to change anything going back.
No. Yes, sir.
Clarence Ward, 720 Goodrich Street again. My question would be, why do you want to change from Board of Selectmen to Select Board? Why? Who wants this? And why do they want it? Thank you.
I believe when it was, try to answer that, and help me if I ever got the, I believe when it came up, we were in the midst of a lot of political things happening in the country, and the belief by several members of the board, and not
Your board,
unanimous.
The
What?
committee.
The committee, yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry, the Charter Review Committee
This board, this.
was the term select men might deter our younger female residents from running for certain offices. And so there were several members who felt that maybe changing to select board would encourage more, it would be more gender neutral and encourage more people from across the residents to participate.
Yeah, it
Am
was-
I correct?
Yeah, it was just to change it to more inclusive language, that was all. And
That-
then there were some people who felt strongly that they would like it changed to more inclusive language, and some people who felt strongly that they didn't see a reason for change. And it was enough of a, that, okay, well, we'll put it to a vote, and it made the supermajority to make it to.
Right, and we took a survey too,
Yep, it came
and
up.
it was pretty half and half, so that's why it's still there, although at this point,
The vast majority was ambivalent.
yes, they
Yeah.
didn't, they just didn't care. Katie?
Okay, Katie Adams, Williams Drive. I'm pretty indifferent myself as a selectman. The term Board of Selectmen doesn't personally bother me at all. The only thing that I think is, I'm always saying I have a BOS meeting and I always write BOS and we have to adopt a new acronym, MOTSB. And that's the only thing that I think of is how often we say BOS. So in that case, and we use a lot of acronyms in government, so we just got to get ready to have MOTSB meetings, if I did have that right.
AOJ.
SB.
There was that, and I think the other thing that came up was, for the most part, people who felt strongly about wanting to change it felt strongly that they wanted their daughters to see more inclusive language. People who didn't just said that, I don't see why we have to change. So I don't like change. And I don't like change wasn't as strong an argument for some of us as it means something to me to be able to share with my child. So there was that. So we'll see what happens at town meeting. You'll vote up, down. Jim?
Actually, I have heard both Select Board and Board of Selectmen used over the last year
Yeah.
interchangeably, not just by this body. In fact, during the public hearing last year on this topic, one of the members of the Board of Selectmen spoke against changing it and referred to it as the Select Board. So it seems interchangeable to me. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another, but I do believe that there is enough sentiment to let the citizens vote and make that determination in town meeting.
And I believe that's why it's still there.
That's fine.
On that one. So that one is going to probably be there. Next, change the manner of the town clerk from appointed to elected. If
From
you go
elected to appointed.
elected to appointed. If you go to section 312, line 510. Oh, I should do it this way, it'll be faster. Let's see. You can see it's in red and it's crossed out because if it's voted to be appointed, the section disappears. If it's voted to be elected, the section stays. And it's in red because it either goes one way or the other. The problem with, if we do it appointed, I'm not sure where the job description would go. Is there someone, can I ask Heather, the town manager, where would an appointed town clerk job description be placed? Sir? Heather?
It would depend on where they fell with union, non-union, so that typically is how that is resolved. I would guess this would be obviously a non-union position because it doesn't fall under what is our clerical union personnel, and that would probably be under the salary administration plan of personnel.
And then if I may ask, just clarification, if it became appointed, then it would not be in the charter at all, because all appointed positions,
They're in-
No,
they are in
the-
there. So I'm bringing this up because as a board, as we're discussing this, we have to realize if it is decided we need to come up with an appointed language as opposed to elected language.
There is a section of
Oh, wait.
appointments.
Or does this, is this a good job? This would have to be moved to a different section of the charter.
It wouldn't be in the charter at all, I don't think.
Actually,
Right.
it would. Section 4-2, powers and duties of the town manager. Subsection C,
Do you have a number?
line number 615 or so.
Yep. But that is not a job description.
Yeah, there's no job description.
Nor is there job descriptions for
Oh,
any of these other positions.
okay, so that, so I would perceive then that if it was voted to be an appointed, then that job description would go under,
No, that's the change right there, the red line. Is what Mark is
Town
saying.
clerk, who is not currently, shall be
Okay.
a resident.
That's the change. If you take out the other section, you put it in right there.
So the duties
Right.
are
They're
in,
right there.
but the duties are in another place.
The duties are a job description that
Right.
don't fall under town manager.
The duties are wherever town, tax
Yeah.
collector and
Right.
municipal finance and all
All
of
the
those.
But those exist in the financial functions of the
Right,
town in the
right.
charter.
But not right there.
No, they don't exist there, they
Right, right.
exist in a financial section. I'm not sure that there's a part of the charter that addresses what the clerk is doing, the role of the clerk. The role of the clerk could still be the very first section that it appears.
Well, I
to
mean,
be.
does the police chief, yeah,
Yeah,
right,
do we
that's
have
right.
that?
Public Works, Council on Aging.
We have a section for all of those in the
No.
charter. I don't remember those in the charter.
um, the issue that I saw is where it is located presently, it's under elected officials.
Yes,
It would have to be moved to another section.
but
That
it wouldn't
is
be
not
in, but it wouldn't be in the charter anymore.
Just where that change was made and that was
Right.
it.
Right.
Okay, in my looking over, I just wanted the board to be aware that that's an issue.
Okay.
Where does it go, so that it doesn't disappear? Because there are duties of the town clerk that are all over the charter.
That's because it's elected.
No,
No.
even if it's appointed, the town
Even if
clerk
it's
would still be
appointed.
responsible.
Like at town meeting, the town clerk has certain things, at elections, the town clerk has certain things, and many of those are spelled out in the charter, which is why I'm asking, does the job description, which is 510, which is the job description, would that just go to another section, subsection somewhere?
I don't think of the charter, I think it.
Heather,
Go.
Heather has
I'm gonna,
input.
I just, maybe clarification, I don't know if you need to spell it out, because most, those responsibilities would be, are per Mass General law.
okay. All right, so it's something we've got to just make sure that we do correctly if we do make that change. Sir, go ahead, I know, thank you for being patient.
Clarence Lord, 720 Goodrich Street. This has always been an elected position, and the people in town have enjoyed doing that. And there have been times that the Board of Selectmen, over all the years I've been here, 38 or so, sometimes the town clerk and the Board of Selectmen have crossed swords to a certain degree. And we liked it, that we were able to elect someone that could do that. And I like it as it is today, and I would like for it to stay the way it is. And if it gets changed, I would like for the majority of the people in the town to be the ones that have to say that it's going to change.
And that's what's going to happen. And sir, just to explain to you why it came up to begin with, when we did research of town clerks and positions, because we researched a lot of positions at the beginning, we discovered that about half the towns and cities, whatever, had appointed, and the other half had elected. So the issue raised was this elected official, correct me if I'm wrong, is the only salaried elected official.
That's right.
Correct, Heather?
That is right.
And when we were beginning the process of the charter, we were trying to clarify elected people versus employees. And since the town clerk was being paid, there was discussion on whether or not the town clerk is an employee and should be moved over to the other side. That's where it all began. And as we did our research, we discovered that half the towns do it one way, half the other. And then we did do a survey, and there were quite a few people on both sides, which is why it's still here. Does that make sense, sir?
Yes, it does, but I go back to my point, and my point is that most of the citizens of the town that I talk to, they like the fact that they can come in and elect someone that maybe the Board of Selectmen doesn't like.
And what'll happen then in town meeting is then it'll get voted one way or the other by the people at town meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I might just add a little data to this discussion. Early on, we agreed that we were going to on each of these controversial ones, we were gonna put together position papers that talked about the pros and the cons of the controversial items. And myself and someone who's no longer on the committee were gonna attack that one. So I began to do a little bit of research. And I'd just like to share with the group what I learned about that. It is relatively equally split in the Commonwealth. And most of the people who have opinions are current town clerks. They almost unanimously like it the way it is in their town. But they're split in terms of some are appointed and some are elected. The key differentiator, and while I totally respect Mr. Floyd's position and agree with it, the key differentiator is the skill set that's required. It has become a very complex job. It needs to understand Mass General law relative to elections, relative to open meeting law, relative to what you can and can't do in documentation, how long you have to keep records. There's a real detailed skill set. And when these town clerks from various towns weighed in, they did it from a point where the person speaking had that skill set. So they were saying, yeah, you have to be as smart as me, you have to know everything I know, but the benefits are, and one side were saying things like the check and balance to be able to disagree with the select board or the board of selectmen. Some of the others complain that it's better that I'm appointed because then I'm part of a collective bargaining group with a small c, and people care about my salary and compare me to other towns, as opposed to just kind of being out by myself and nobody pays attention to what I make or what my professional development is, etc. So I do believe it's up to the people. The main differentiator, in my opinion, is the skill set. And there's really, unless you do a rigorous campaigning process that tests somebody's skill set, it's difficult to have someone who's running for an office demonstrate that they understand all those things that are required for the job. I don't really care one way or the other, but I think that's what people have to understand. The check and balance, critical, all right? But by the same token, maybe that means you need to elect an ombudsman or something. But this job takes with it a whole lot of responsibilities relative to MGL and the elections and several other things that somebody has to have that skill set.
Well, one of the things I've always liked about the way it is now is that the Board of Selectmen, say for instance, can't be the determinant that comes in and says, you're fired because you don't have such and such a skill set. It'll have to go back up to the people in the town to determine whether that person is fired or not. Thank you.
I'll go with Mr. Rogers and Mr. Law.
I've listened to what was said, and I think from a skill set standpoint, there are many assistant town clerks around in municipalities, and I have every confidence in the voters of Lunenburg that they will make sure that the person is competent and qualified. I have a procedural question here, and I wonder why it was inserted. Let me refer to item number, line 617. It says, shall be, blah, 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 let's see. And town clerk, who, if not currently, shall be a resident of the town and a registered voter within 180 days of appointment. Why was that put in?
Mass General law.
That's a Mass General law?
Because of the role in the election process, they have to. It's my understanding that they have to.
The reason I ask, and I'm happy to hear that, because it just didn't make any sense to me. We have a town manager, in this particular instance, that's a resident of someplace else. And I just wondered what the differentiation was. Because
I believe it's because of the elections.
That's what he just said, yeah. I feel strongly that the position of town clerk should be an elected position. I think she's woefully underpaid. I agree with the checks and balances, and I'm confident that the people of Lunenburg are smart enough to make sure that the individuals that are putting their hat, so-called, in the ring will be qualified. Thank you.
Mr. Luck?
Carl Luck, 50 Sunset Lane. A couple things mentioned here tonight, first by the town manager, I'm thankful that she's here, that needs to be considered. I'm not advocating in either direction here, just making sure we in the voters have information. It sounds like there may be employment issues that we need to also address that could be unintended consequences of, what the contract is. Are they in a bargaining, does it move from here to a bargaining group, or, so I think that side of it also has to be explored and made clear to the town. If there are differences in if one is in a union and one is not in a union, could be an important difference that the town should understand, because there could be financial implications to this decision that should be known.
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you say it was a non-union? You believed it would fall under non-union?
Guesstimate that would be non-union, but unless we had termination by our labor council.
Okay.
And if I may add, whatever document we come up with, a lawyer has to go through before we present it to town meeting to make sure that it's legal. And then the state legislature has to vote it.
So can we, or can you as chair, find an answer to whether or not that position would be considered a union position?
I don't even know where to look. Where would I
Town
look?
council.
Yeah, check with town council or have him point you to the labor council.
Wait,
as she
all right.
said. Thank you.
All right, give me a second, I gotta write that down.
Sorry.
To do.
I'm not sure that whether it's appointed or elected, it makes a difference where they fall, does it?
The only point I was making, I know the town manager made a different point. The only point I was making is that some of the town clerks felt that if they were elected and not appointed, nobody was looking out for their hierarchy relative to other town clerks in the Commonwealth, the market, their salaries, their benefits, etc.
They were treated differently than personnel.
No, it's just, they weren't treated at all. They were an elected official, and whatever the town meeting voted their bottom line salary was the only discussion that ever happened, because they weren't an employee for anybody.
All right. Well, that was great information. 3,
You're
provide,
holding that because you want to comment? Or?
oh, I'm sorry.
Katie Adams, Williams Drive, commenting as a citizen with the issue of the appointed town clerk. The amount of uncertainty we have about what would happen if we had an appointed town clerk should probably give us pause to the fact that we may not be prepared for one. I think we should have answers to all the questions before we change it. A couple reasons for changing it that come up. One is the idea of what is their skill set. We have to assign what we feel their skill set would be. Well, in government, you don't have to present a specific skill set to be the president of the country. Unfortunately, but in all reality, to say that an elected position requires a skill set, I didn't have to give a resume to anybody when I ran for selectman. And so to use that as a reason for doing it, I don't think it holds a lot of weight in terms of government. It doesn't require typically that there's a skill set as long as you meet requirements of being a citizen and being the right age. So that I don't think really holds up in terms of a good reason. Also, the idea that it's the only paid position in town in terms of most elected officials in town do it as volunteers. When we think of that, I just think of state level elected officials and national elected officials. Typically, elected officials do hold salaries. So it's actually unique that those of us who are volunteering don't make money, and that the fact that the clerk does is more of the norm for an elected position. Just at the local level, she's the only one. So again, if that's a reason, I don't really think that reason holds a lot of weight in why you would change something. Just as it doesn't hold water in terms of being a good reason, in my opinion. When I started advocating in the town government space, one of the most friendly faces to me was always the town clerk. She was very welcoming, and I think it represented the fact that she knew she was there for the people, and that's all I was. I was just one of the, citizens. In democracy, it's very inefficient. It's supposed to be, because it's supposed to default to the people. So the more things you appoint and the more things you take away from the people, it may become more efficient, but it becomes more efficient on behalf of whoever's running it, and that's not the people. It's a small group, so I would think we should keep it elected.
Thank you. I'm going to move to providing a second annual town meeting in the fall, time and date to be set by law. To be honest, we did get, and I was told I can share this, a legal, because when you add a second, you cannot, I guess you cannot call it a second town meeting. So the lawyer, the legal counsel suggested two ways of adding it. It would be added to section 2.24, line 119, which I'll show you right here. And this is more informational for our board. It says, we have in Brown, there shall be a second town meeting held in October on a date and time fixed by bylaw. Legal counsel has suggested two ways of handling that. The issue being that a town meeting runs under different rules than a special town meeting. And you can see that, wherever the bylaws are, there's just two different sets of rules, and the legal counsel wants to make sure that the second town meeting can be run as a town meeting. So, provisions, add at the end of 2.4, something like, provisions of this charter or the town's bylaws applicable to special town meetings only shall not apply to the second town meeting held annually in October, November, so that it's specifically spelled out, not special. His preference is to say, at the end of this, right here, after bylaw, to say, all provisions of Mass General laws or of regulations promulgated thereunder applicable to annual town meetings shall, insofar as practicably, apply to the second town meeting held annually in October and November, not those provisions applicable to special town meetings. So, there's a mouthful of words in there, but what I think the council is saying that if we add this, and we'll bring this up at our next meeting, to maybe add this, so that special town meeting and regular town meetings are specifically under two different guidelines, and it's really out there. The feeling was, how do we word this section? So that was sent out, I think in December by Jamie to everyone, right? You sent us a copy of that and referenced something else. So think about that, because we'll need to decide which way we'd like to do it, although the lawyer would prefer, assuming no one has.
I would say that basically, if you're going to, the second one would be better, if you're distinguishing between the second town meeting not being a special town meeting, the first one reads almost like,
yeah,
we're confused about what we want it to be.
right.
We want it to be a second town
The
meeting.
second one is very strongly that it's a second town meeting,
And special
there's
town-
no special town meeting is applicable. So,
Right.
so that's more of informational for everyone. That's going to be coming up on that one.
Since you have on the agenda a spot to discuss, deliberate, and vote on these changes, would you entertain a motion?
I would
to that end?
love to entertain any motion to that effect.
I would move to use the second language and add that to this section.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
It sounds very legal.
It does.
I think
I
it's
like
made by the word.
All right, with no, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So it passes unanimously, which, all right, so add, I'm going to put this, number 3, to line 122. Add to line 122. It's going to mess up all the line numbers now. 4, providing that persons appointed to town committees only be residents to town. I believe we voted that in our last meeting. Someone correct me? Mark? Did we vote that in? Or did we just discuss it?
I think
We
we
should
voted
be
it.
voted.
We voted it. Where are you?
Okay, this would be line
Number
566.
4 of this list. That appointed are residents.
566. We had, someone made a,
Steve, what's in the minutes, and I believe it reflects our discussion, we agreed that the Finance Committee needs to be a voter, registered voter.
correct.
All the others could be a resident.
So we did vote that,
We did
correct?
vote that.
I wanted to clarify that we did vote that change. Thank you. A resident came through, and once again, public hearings, come and tell us. And we discussed this part, and there was no reason to leave it to just registered voters. This also allows for members of the committee, members of the community who, how he put it as, who, how did he put it? He put it in a very nice way.
Yeah, well, it's members of the community who are unable.
Unable, who do not, or do not want to register to vote. There are actually people in town who prefer not to register to vote, and the charter reads that they can't do anything, and they would like to participate.
Well, the charter
Charter
right now is silent.
Charter
Right.
is
What
silent.
we had done is we had proposed language that said you had to be a registered voter.
Right.
And then we discussed that last time, that the registered voter then narrowed the pool even further from any town resident that wanted to participate
Right.
in, like, agricultural commission.
And the reason I wanted to include this is there was a comment, I believe, by Katie. I'm not very good with names, Katie, sorry.
It's okay, Bill.
Or someone who says, what if someone...
That was Katie. That
Yeah, it was
in the
Katie.
public comment.
Someone was too young
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. In discussing,
Like a high school student.
yeah, a high school student. I can't have
Was
my
that
thought.
your concern? That they would be too young, or that we
It
could
could
just say
The
resident?
question that if you said a registered voter, you were assigning an age of 18.
Right,
When you remove registered voter, you removed an age criteria, and I didn't know if you'd want to assign one.
You know
Yeah.
what, and I don't think we should, and this is why, and I spoke to a few people, not on the committee, just so you know, not on the committee, who said this allows a high school freshman to be part of government. This allows us, an 8th grader who is working on something, who the select board or whoever is selecting thinks that they have the things to be on certain committees or whatever it represents. Yes, Katie?
I think we want to really think that through, because things like the agricultural commission, they can deal with property in town and ownership of property in town. So I think you'd want to go group by group and really see the implications of opening something up to people who, they're not property owners in town, they're taxpayers in town, and how can they make decisions on my behalf? And what happens when the
Are you
scale...
talking age or just
Age. If the scale tips and you have too many people who are too young, or too many people that aren't registered voters, then you could have certain entities in control of people that don't even vote in town. So
And I will
there's
answer that by saying that all of this has to go through from a list submitted to it by the town manager screening committee. So the screening committee would only allow the people who are eligible or who have those skills.
yeah, I think you're in a different section. Basically, the talent bank form would be submitted.
Thank you.
We could change it so that it's a resident of age, but basically, again, that's changing the charter, which has been silent on it to date. So if, and I don't think that we were talking about, like middle schoolers, but
No.
I think if somebody wants to be on, I don't know, the cultural, I have no idea. I don't even know what all the committees are out there that people get appointed to.
And I didn't know whether or not it mattered. It was just
Right.
differentiating the fact that one assigned an age and one half didn't. And
Correct.
that-
By making it a voter, it's a very specific age. By just saying a town resident, it is open to a larger population.
And I think by making it a voter, the inadvertent response was that we then assigned an age,
Right.
because we didn't assign an age before.
We didn't assign one before.
There isn't one before. We talked about registered voter, that assigned an age, and then we took registered voter out, which
Right.
eliminated the age
So
again.
originally, there was no age anywhere. We wanted to go with registered voter. And then someone from the community spoke well, saying that, are you sure? Because then that does an age, and you have to be a voter, and you have to be in the roster. Disenfranchised.
people.
And so we said, well, we'll just make it 2 town residents. So in effect, the charter hasn't changed. We're just saying that whatever this committee is,
Any.
Any committee,
Any committee,
any appointed committee.
we wanted to include townspeople to be part of those committees, to make selections, if I read this correct, right?
Right.
And these are committees who are going to select things.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please help me out.
This is one specific incidence of where town resident is listed. I think to the point, the charter is silent otherwise. And I would also point out that we're talking about appointed positions. So it's incumbent upon the appointing body to decide what the qualifications are and whether age is an appropriate requirement or qualification. I don't think we should overcomplicate the charter for the sake of, defining age.
So then last point on, because Finance Committee was the only one you called out to have different criteria, even this group here could be non-registered voters and children.
Only up to 2. Only 2. And one of the reasons we excluded the finance committee, because that had to deal with the whole financial thing.
Will they tell us how to
Voting
vote
at
at
town
town
meeting.
meeting?
Well,
They tell us how, that's true, they are, it's like the Board of Selectmen, they
Well,
tell us how to
want
vote.
Charter Review Committee to be registered voters in town since they're working on basically our constitution. So I just think going through group by group and seeing the implications of saying, what if several people here were non-voters?
2.
You have to bring all this to town meeting for vote. It's just thinking more than it is
The decision, though,
opinion.
is the town meeting, right? And those are town voters.
But you're voting whether or not we get to vote.
Right, yeah.
But this committee is appointed also.
True.
Again, you have
Have appointed
Oh,
bodies.
elected,
appointed.
An elected,
elected
elected and
person,
appointed.
appointed. as well.
I believe Nancy and I are the only town people.
And you
no.
were
Well, no.
appointed by.
And we're both appointed by the town
Elected,
moderator.
and
I
he's
have been
elected.
appointed as well by the
Oh,
school committee. as
That's
a
true, that's true, you were.
And I'm appointed.
Oh, that's right, by the financial, I forgot, you're not actually on the,
So it's not random.
But there is an appointing body to
There is
Mr.
an appointing
Everson's
body.
point.
That's right.
And I think it makes sense that the appointing body set whatever criteria they believe is important.
I mean, we elect these appointing bodies. We have faith in these appointing bodies. Think
all right,
we can-
Mr. Luck, go ahead.
Carl Oaks, 50 Sunset Lane. I'm pretty confused, I'm not sure what the charter says anymore, so I'm just going to tell you what I think. It's tough for me to keep up with which side of this argument people are on at different times. Sometimes we want to restrict participation, sometimes we don't. I think we should err towards not restricting. So I don't know why we would, other than perhaps a resident, why would we restrict anything beyond being a resident? To have to be a registered voter, even for the Finance Committee, could preclude a very highly qualified, you could have a Nobel Prize guy move into town on finance, who's a citizen of UK, he doesn't want to give it up because of his health insurance, and simply doesn't want to register to vote and become a citizen, and therefore he can't vote because he's not a citizen. We wouldn't be able to take advantage of that expertise in town. I don't understand the compelling reason to restrict to in any place that a person should have to be a registered voter.
Terry or Mark, you're on the finance committee.
Or work.
Representing, okay.
Well, we had that very issue come up with the finance committee. An individual was appointed, turns out was not a citizen, and therefore not a registered voter. And when it came time to vote the positions of the finance committee, that person was unable to participate. And we felt that that was inappropriate for a committee of 7. To have one person whose vote did not count.
At town meeting.
At town
No,
meeting.
At town
Only
meeting.
at
no
town meeting.
vote.
At town meeting, just town
He
meeting.
couldn't vote at town meeting, but he could still vote as a
Committee.
in your committee.
Can I recall the conversation we had with Bob?
Just not a town meeting, you
No,
couldn't
he
vote.
can't, he just.
Hi.
Couldn't vote.
Even,
You can express an opinion.
in
or
committee meeting.
Participate in discussion.
But you can't even participate in discussion at town meeting without a town.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand town meeting, but when you're meeting in the finance committee, could you vote?
Oh, yeah, he could vote to make a recommendation. He could not vote to move money.
In town meeting.
No.
No,
the
at
meetings.
their meetings.
Right.
What was the reason, where is that, is that a state regulation from?
What's that?
That he couldn't vote to have moved money?
Correct.
Why couldn't he vote to move money?
You probably could vote, well, I'm trying to remember now. The only time that it would be if there was a chapter 40 something change that we had to sign off on. You probably could. I don't even know, it's just basically one of those things that would come up. But the reason why it came up for us was that, one, we were concerned that he would make recommendations that he would not then be able to vote on, and it was not known to the town that there was someone making recommendations, that he was, like basically not. And I think that the discussion around whether or not someone comes in with all of that information, that would be great. And I'm not sure that they couldn't participate. They might not be a member of the committee, but there's still no reason why they couldn't participate. We have several members of the community who participate regularly and are very helpful without being on the committee. So I think for us, it's like when we go to sit at the town meeting, at the table, given that everybody in that area has a role to vote at town meeting, we just felt strongly that it would be good to have registered voters at the table. That's all. You can disagree. I mean, that's...
Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. I did want to comment on this because as I sat back there, a couple of things just stuck out at me. One, I understand the registered voter versus resident discussion. I did want to add that just because you're a registered voter and you're on Finance Committee doesn't mean you're going to vote at town meeting. And I sat in the Finance Committee, and there was at least one, if not two, for whatever reason I chose not to vote on. So just because you're at that table doesn't mean you're going to necessarily vote. As for the registered voter and it being 18 and up, because that's what it is by law, I think that I understand the appointed piece and that there's an appointed body. However, you could have a group of appointed body that is a whole bunch of 16-year-old kids. It's not that they don't know what they're doing, and they could be very good at what they're doing, but when we sit here and say that the appointed body could make the decision on what a qualified person would be, I'm not so sure we'd be able to use age. I think we start talking about discrimination if we sit there and choose the person based on age. So I would just be very cautious. I agree with Katie in that I think that ramifications of each different board needs to be looked at before we paint with a broad brush saying that the only board that needs to have a registered voter qualification would be Finance Committee, because I think that there are other boards that make good decisions that would warrant having a registered voter, just to have over 18.
So I'm going to do a point of order. I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to try anyway. At line 562, the town manager shall be appointed by these Board of Selectmen from a list submitted to it by the town manager screening committee, which shall consist of, that's where the two town residents would be.
Okay.
It's to do the town manager. The people who would select those two town residents to be appointed by the town moderator. That is what this section is talking about the town manager and appointing and creating the town manager search list. Am I correct, Mr. Moderator? As I read this section. What we wanted to do is, since the town manager runs the entire town, I believe we wanted representation from the entire town, which is why we wanted to make sure it was just open to residents rather than elected voters.
And I think part of the discussion that we're having here also incorporates line 317.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Which was the appointments to committee shall be those who are registered to vote in town. We struck that language in our last meeting.
Okay, right. 317, thanks. But I'm just saying that a lot of this is very...
And the problem was that we struck that language and the language wasn't in there before. I think that's the point, is at this point,
Yeah.
Are you suggesting then that we should add language that creates a bottom age? And you can suggest that, but because
Right.
it was
The
silent.
original document said nothing,
Right.
so
Yeah.
anyone could have
Yeah.
been. The only place where it was, had to be a registered voter was for the town manager, correct?
No,
No,
we
it
didn't.
wasn't even there. So we've just added it to have the town manager, just to have representation. So we're talking 2 people on the
Well,
town.
I guess I'm looking more here,
We struck it out. I believe we took it out, correct?
I'm
We-
sorry,
we
where are
did,
you
but-
looking?
But I think
360.
the question is, while the charter was silent to it, we added it and we took it out, should we add it relative to of age? And having an age limit for appointed members of any committee, is that what I'm hearing?
yes. Yes.
And so that may be a point of further discussion for us
All right.
to deliberate
Check.
on further.
Into
I said further, please.
Appointments to committees shall be those who are registered to vote in town. Could, again, I'm just thinking out loud. Appointments to committees shall be those who are residents of voting age, and that
Just so you
removes
know,
it.
this is going to be removed.
She knows that.
I know that.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if, so it was removed, but I'm, again, thinking out loud. Could it say something like, appointments to committees shall be those who are residents of town of voting age? It removes the requirement to be a registered voter, but keeps the requirement to be of voting age. So it would keep the requirement of ages 18 and over. Not that I have any problem with a younger person, because I think some of them have some better ideas than we do.
And that's actually a good suggestion. Thank you. We will look into that. So I'm going to keep moving because we're not going to get to everybody's thing. Providing that conduct of town meeting be governed by town meeting time, we have voted to include this, but it was on the agenda for last year, and I just wanted to say, it's in purple. We've taken out this last part, but we're going to use the latest version of town meeting, and it is in Mr. Murphy, where are copies located for anyone who needs to see it?
The library, of course.
And I wanted just to make sure, because we have been using that for years, and now we're just making it official, so that when Mr. Murphy is no longer moderator, the next moderator will realize that this is how Lunenburg has been doing it, and we need to continue doing it. Number 6, and I have some legal ease on this one too. Clarify and confirm the appointment powers of the Board of Selectmen and Town Manager to provide for appointment of various department heads to be appointed by the Town Manager subject to ratification by the Board of Selectmen. It's 1091. Sorry for the dizziness. 1000. But I thought this might. And it comes under filling of vacancies, 7-8F. There's been concern, I guess, about pools of candidates and multiple body X, Y, and Z. And I can't even remember some of the reasons why it's there. But it's left over from something last year.
It was basically, the issue raised is with the appointment, for committees where there are appointments made, that the appointing authority will have 30 days following notice to make an appointment to the committee. If it fails to make an appointment to the committee will make an appointment. But one of the questions that we had was, and there's still some discussion to have around the filling of vacancies, because at some point, it never talks about when the authority to make the appointment goes back to the original appointing authority. But say, for example, if at the expiration of 30 days, there is a pool of candidates available, then someone will have to have made the appointment. If there is no pool, then that gives the town the opportunity to try to recruit people. So that was basically where that came from,
Okay,
was
thank
that it puts a time limit on that may not be possible to meet. But again, my question on it also had to do with, once it is given to the members of the multiple member body to fill the vacancy, does it sit with them until that vacancy is filled, which may take a long time. I know when I joined the finance committee, there'd only been 4 or 5 members for several years. So I think that was one of the reasons why I had a question about when it goes back to the original appointing authority.
So when this was sent, Bob sent this to council, he came back with these first things. First, as you say, 30 days to fill a vacancy is insufficient.
Can you make that bigger?
Let's see, I probably can. Plus command. How's that?
How big?
Hey, I was asked to go bigger. Unfortunately, I don't have Word on this machine, so I'm using PDF, so I can get it that big. How's that? First, 30 days is insufficient. That is especially so if Section 710 applies, which is debatable. He suspects that 710 means employees other than those on multiple bodies. So the 30 days, you just remove it, make it 60 or 90 days. That's one of his suggestions.
Okay, well, that would be 710. That notice of vacancies has to do with employees.
Correct. Second, what is the remaining members of a multi-body with a vacancy do not forthwith give written notice of such a vacancy? Section may say forthwith and no later than, so that's another place that you can add. I will send this PDF to the committee. This was sent out to us in a big document, and I just took pieces.
Okay.
And then third, so we're going to need to look at this one at our next meeting because there's just an awful lot of words here. Then he talks about a pool of candidates. What if there's no pool of candidates available? Who determines that? And he gives some suggestions. So I will send that out to you so that we can, but I wanted to bring it up as something, it was a concern in those sections.
Mr. Chair, can I add a comment to that, please?
Hold on, let me, does that make sense to the commission? All right, I'm all right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Dave Vasios, 56 Whiting Street. This issue came up during a couple of appointment processes during the past year, and the wording that was in there originally gave very specific points as to the time frame and so on. I don't disagree that 30 days with our history of the number of talent bank forms that we receive might be too short a time. I do have a problem with the word pool. What is the definition of pool? My feeling is that if we have one talent bank form of one person interested in that position, then it should be required that the appointing authority meet and decide whether that person is qualified or not. If they're not, fine, they don't appoint them, and the process continues. But the reason that wording was in there to begin with, the way it was to not allow the process to be dragged out because the appointing authority didn't have somebody that they wanted to vote into that position.
Okay.
That's my take on it. Thank you.
So this is an area, I will send this PDF to you, which is just...
Well, yeah, that'll be good. And then basically, we just want to revisit whether we want to use the term pool. Pool of candidates.
And what line was that?
1095.
All right.
When you send it out, can you reference
Why?
what lines it talks
Yep,
about?
I wrote,
Referring to?
so 1095 and 7-10. I'm going to try to. That's why I put the numbers in.
So, one of the things, this number 6, for clarifying and confirming the appointment powers to the board, selectman, and town manager, does that also refer to around line 614 of the document, which falls under the powers and duties section of the town manager?
614.
Which has to do with some appointment of positions by the town manager.
Okay, so I should put 614 as a reference point too, right?
I think so.
That would be for the first item.
Number 6? Well, yeah, but on
The 614 would refer
on
to...
this list,
Oh, okay.
number 6, clarify and confirm. This the language on
Okay,
on this
yes.
document, 9.6,
Is not the, what's-
seems more in line with this section of the charter than
okay.
the last
Um,
bit, although they're all intertwined.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then there's some then the Board of Selectmen appointment, section 3, from line 309. Just because you talked about clarifying and confirming the appointment powers of the Board of Selectmen, which is line 309, and the town
Okay.
manager, which is whatever, 614.
Okay, so as you look at this, if you find references, send me where those references are, and at our next meeting, we can include those in there too.
I think that's all
I
I have
think
at the
it's
moment.
probably it, but if you see others.
I will.
Thank you. I'm going to keep going because we're going to get to everything. 7, clarifying the duties of the town manager relating to personnel management, jurisdiction over town facilities, property and day-to-day operations, the budget process, and enforcement of charter provisions by town and town bylaws. So, there are a couple of references to that. I wanted to mention, before we ask for anything, that the original charter states in 678, sorry for this fast screen, 678. If you look, this is the duties of the town manager to see that all provisions of the general laws, this charter, and town bylaws and other votes of the town meeting which require enforcements by the town manager or officers subject to the direction and supervision of the town manager are faithfully executed, performed, or otherwise carried out. Keep that section in mind. At one point, we wanted to, I believe, to clarify that, and we came up with, and I'm sorry, it's all in brown, so we have voted on this, I believe, to include this in as section 711. It says enforcement of charter provisions in town general bylaws. Times are changing, and it says, it shall be the duty of the town manager to see that the provisions of the charter and town general bylaws are faithfully followed and complied with by all town agencies and town employees. And that is, it says something similar in the other section. Whenever it appears to the town manager that any town agency or town employee is failing to follow any provision of this charter or town general bylaws, the town manager shall in writing, and now we're describing a process. And let me finish, I'll read this so it's in the record. Shall in writing cause notice to be given to such agency or employee directing compliance with the charter. If it shall appear to the select board that the town manager personally is not following the provisions of the charter or town general bylaws, it shall, by resolution, direct the attention of the town manager to those areas in which they believe there is a failure to comply with charter provisions. The procedures are made available in Chapter 23(1)A of the Mass General Laws, may be used to determine the rights, duties, status, legal relations arising under this charter and town general bylaws, including any question of construction and validity which may be involved in such determination. Now, this describes the process, correct? And we voted to include that in there. As we began this process of the town charter, as a board, we realized there were a truckload of things that people were not doing, if I remember. It had to do with, either it was mailing notifications, a lot of it had to do with notifications, and who does what, and this and that. And I believe, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, we wanted to make sure to spell out the process so that you as a citizen say, this is not being followed. You had a process, the town manager gets notified, and it goes through that process. If she doesn't do it, there's a process. So this is just strengthening our charter and to make sure that we are following its provisions. Mr. Murphy.
Tim Murphy, when you say agency, do you mean committees as well, right? What is agency?
What line?
Well,
Top line.
yeah,
Oh.
the top here. I can't see it, 1152. Notice to begin, it says, several places it said agency. I
Should it say?
I assume we mean committees, right? The finance committee's not following the rules, conservation's not following the rules. And committees, I don't know what the word agency means.
Committee or
Left
board.
out to that.
Committee, board, huh?
If they want to use agency, define it then.
Then define it.
In the definition,
Yeah, it
as
needs to
all
be in
boards and
section
committees.
Yeah, maybe put under definitions.
Okay, so we need to revisit
Yeah.
def of agency in line
It's 1150, 1150.
11,
In a lot of
50.
places.
It shows up a lot of
I think
places.
it is defined under
Anytime.
Is it?
line 66.
All right, say that again, line, town agency, any multiple, oh, but it says town agency.
Yeah, but that's what it says.
That's okay. Multiple member body.
Okay, so let's go back to 1152, and that's why we're here. Oh, that's 1052, sorry. 1052, where are you? Oh, we're on camera. Thanks for your patience.
11:50.
Yeah, yeah.
11.
Yeah.
To such agency, do we need to amend that to town agency all the way, because the definition says town agency, or?
Well, line 1150 says town agency.
Yeah, 1150 refers to town agency and then any such agency.
So I'm thinking this is a clerical error.
I think the words apply.
You think it's fine?
Yeah, because it says town
Okay.
agency, and then it says such agency.
Okay, I wanted to make sure we had it, and I wanted to make sure that the public understood why this section was there. It is in section 4.2, but it's kind of it's kind of out there, and this defines it a little bit better.
Yeah, if we were going to change it at all, the only thing I would change is, instead of saying town agency, just put agency in the definitions, and then wherever it appears, that's what it refers to.
Well,
It's there.
Yeah.
It's all set.
okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Luck, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. In your explanation, the example you used was if some resident or citizen has a concern.
Oh, did I do that again?
You did. This says that the Board of Selectmen, the process for the Board of
But
Selectmen.
who talks to the board of selectmen?
Okay, so, but there's no, okay, so
Excuse me?
you go to the Board of Selectmen and you say,
Yeah.
there's a problem.
If you have a
and they-
complaint-
Actually, it says the town manager is responsible for it. The board of selectmen only gets involved if they think the town manager's not doing it.
Yeah, what I want to know is when a citizen, when a resident thinks.
Go to the town manager, that's the person who has it.
But I think he's saying, what if the town manager
It doesn't say it here, though.
ignores?
Yeah,
the town-
that's the person, that's what it says.
Then you go to the board of selectmen.
Then you go to the board of
town
selectmen.
manager doesn't take action.
Can you go, because I just missed what, I mean, Jay, you pointed out that it's already there and I just missed it. Where does it say a citizen goes to the town
Well, it's
manager?
not going to say.
1148, it shall be the duty of the town manager to see that the provisions are faithfully followed.
When is,
So that's who owns the responsibility for it. And if you think somebody's not doing it, the town manager is the person to go to. The only role the board has is if the town manager isn't doing that.
Okay,
so if you feel that something's not happening, you report it to the town manager. And it's her, well, in this case, in this instance, it's her responsibility. If she doesn't do her job, there are things in the charter that explain how to,
Then you just go to the
Bring
board of
that up.
selectmen. Right.
right? I believe the charter does.
Oh, it says it right there.
Yeah.
Line 1153, it appears to the select board, it's like the town.
Yes,
manager's
there you go.
doing her job.
See line 1153?
yes, yeah, but that's a select board, not the resident.
No, but those, you voted them in to be your voice.
People
and
can
I-
see it, nobody can see it.
I think Mr. Luck's point is that it doesn't call out how the citizen interacts.
The
No.
regular citizen.
It doesn't spell it out, but the
But
process
that's not spelled out
of,
anywhere.
No.
but the process is the same. If you have a complaint, who are the, you go to the specific, if you have a complaint with the police department, you go to the police department. If it's not resolved, you go to the next one up. There's a chain of command that's inherent in this document. So as a citizen, if you didn't know where to go, you would go to the town hall and say, I have a complaint that concerns the charter, and they would tell you, you need to talk to the town manager. Does that make sense? But I wanted everyone to be aware that that was something that we voted in to help make things work. Yeah. 8, providing more specific.
Pardon me. sorry, before you go on to number 8, number 7 also includes clarifying the duties of the town manager relating to the town facilities. We had that comment about cemetery commission.
Yes, and I'm going to
being
bring
included.
that up in just a minute. That's right over
Okay.
here.
All right.
That's a separate, I'd like to bring
Line
that in
eight.
as a separate item.
There's a different section dealing with that too.
I have it in
Well,
my
I have
notes
it
as public
658
comments.
references the full jurisdiction over the rental use,
Right.
maintenance, and repair
Yes.
uses of town facilities. That isn't under number 7, which
All
we're
right.
clarifying the duties
you
of
like
the
to
town
bring that-
manager relating to personnel management jurisdiction of town facilities.
Yeah.
Town facilities is on.
All right, well, if you would like.
Now it seems to be the appropriate time to talk about that,
Well,
since we're
then,
still on
I
number
will
7.
skip ahead in my list. But I'm going to keep this
You're the
marker.
chair.
Nope, I can
but
skip
I
ahead.
now makes sense to talk about
So-
that, didn't I?
In regard, I will go to that. I will skip ahead. 421, which is line 658. And 658, right? And I will try to make this bigger. That's as big as I can get it. So move your chairs closer. I'm sorry, if you need to. Oh, now I lost my numbers. Okay, so we need this next line because it's part of this. And I'm going to do this. So right now it reads, the town manager has a full jurisdiction subject to written policies over the rental, use, maintenance, and repair of all town facilities and property except property under the control of the school committee and the conservation commission. Now, I'm going to bring this up because it was already brought up. Cemetery. It was brought to my attention as part of the written comments. The cemetery commission would like to be included in that section with the school committee, and they brought up this, that 1935, the land was donated by Charles Dickinson for this purpose only, an acre of land, a permanent cemetery superintendent's quarters consisting of a main office building, 2 stories. So there is a deed that says specifically that the land was designated for use by the cemetery department, and that thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, for the cemetery commissioner office, etc., right? 102235 as part of the, was it the charter?
No, 10/22/35 was part of the
Town meeting will accepted the gift, conveying to the town a small lot on Holman Street, which is the lot the shack is, for lack of a better word, the structure is on now. Subject to the restriction and on the condition that the granted premises will be used by the grantee only for public purposes connected with its cemetery department, and shall not be used for burial purposes. So I'm just giving you a bit of a history here. It was sent to me, and I took this out of all the things that you sent. And all of this was sent to you at some point. And then book 186, page 18 of whatever this deed thing is. This conveyance is a gift for public purposes, and there's the thing, public purposes, subject to the restriction and on the condition that the granted premises will be used by the grantee only for public purposes connected with its cemetery department, but shall not be used for burial purposes. So, as we look back at that, there's been I will leave that, well, I can bring it back up. There's been a lot of discussion on the cemetery. So, Bill, I can say Bill, right? Mr. Taylor, whatever, is bringing up that the Cemetery Commission feels that town facilities under the control of the, except for school committee, the Conservation Commission, he would like to add, and the Cemetery Commission. That's the thing. I want to hear opinions from the public. As a board, I will send you this PDF also. We really need to think through this because this has been in discussion for a while and we need to bring it to yes, no, whatever. So, do you have anything else to add, Bill? Because I'm trying to make sure.
Bill Tyler, 5 Grand Street. I wish I I had known the format was going to be like this, I would have saved my comments.
Well, that's why I was trying to get people through the comments, and I guess I messed
I mean, I
that
don't want
up.
to read the whole thing over again, it's not necessary, it's just a matter of, everybody's aware of the old building that was torn down, and we're in the process of building a new one, and it's being paid for by the cemetery commission, and we just want to make sure that it follows the deed's wishes, and it's used for cemetery purposes only.
So, as a building, you're just concerned that it might be used for something other than cemetery?
Well, we don't know, it's just, we just want to, because, the town's growing, there may be future buildings down the road, I mean, 50 years, who knows?
But right now, it states in all the, help me out, I'm on a limb here, I'm a musician. Legally, it's basically supposedly for cemetery purposes. It's already stated.
Right.
It's there. And that's it. Do we need to have it listed in the charter because it is already stated for cemetery purposes? I'm assuming, and I'm trying to figure this out, that there will be times when the cemetery people will allow other things to happen in order to allow the town to be more efficient in certain things. And I'm trying to think of examples that someone brought up the other day. In summertime, storing a snow blower, or in the wintertime, storing a lawnmower just to get it out of the way of whatever. Is that a problem?
I don't think it's going to be a problem, but I just think it should be spelled out.
You would like it spelled out because you would like to have it spelled out. In the deeds, it does say, basically, it's the cemetery stuff.
I mean, historically, any seasonal equipment that the cemetery had is always stored down on West Street, the old Parks building, and, we know eventually that building's going to go away. And one of the things that's stored down there in the wintertime is the landscape trailer with the lawnmowers and snow blowers and everything on them. And we have no problem with that being stored in our new building, that's not a problem, or any cemetery equipment. But
Do you have cemetery equipment that's stored elsewhere at the moment?
in the wintertime, yes.
In the wintertime, because the building cannot store it.
Well, we don't have a building, it was torn down.
Oh, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Oh, the West Street building.
No, the old cemetery building.
Older Street.
I was just there.
You went to the wrong
All
door.
right, never mind. I told you, I'm a musician.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it done. All right, sir, if I could put you in abeyance, how's that?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think we need to be a little bit careful here because I'm just playing devil's advocate here. And if we're going to appoint people to cemeteries, parks, AdCom, and then place the full jurisdiction of the use, maintenance, and repair of all these facilities somewhere else, then why do we have people on these committees?
Well, that's
Because
why
their
we need
hands
to
are
discuss
tied.
this.
And the answer is to set policy. And the jurisdiction for use, rental, repair is a town function that can be best utilized by a centralized town organization so that we don't duplicate a resource in all 5 of those places.
But is that abundantly clear here?
I think it needs to be.
Well, I
And I'm
think-
asking, is it?
Right, and I think the other question that I would ask is, and I don't know whether or not you also took a look at under section 3.5, if the day-to-day care and maintenance of the cemeteries is under the supervision of the town manager, that was okay.
Well, yeah, that's
So if the day-to-day,
Day-to-day
I'm sorry,
care.
382, I'm sorry?
Day-to-day care and maintenance isn't specifically about buildings, we're talking about buildings and property. But, the town manager is in charge of day-to-day operations, which has been delegated to the DPW. So we're not talking about maintenance or day-to-day control, we're talking about having control of the building that we're paying for and making sure that it's used for what it's designed for and built for.
All right, so then you're talking about the use and maintenance of that building would fall to the cemetery commission, not the DPW.
Correct.
But the current charter says that the property in town is either the town's or in 2 specific cases, the schools or conservations. It doesn't say parks, cemeteries, library, or anything else. So that's to me, that's a major red line change, is to decentralize responsibility for facilities that should be shared and maximized from a town point of view. And I think the charter says that now, but to change it moves that a different direction.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Rogers?
I disagree with the premise that first of all, the cemetery folks are not appointed, they're elected. The Parks Department is elected, not appointed, and the sewer folks are elected, not appointed. And it's my considered opinion that anybody that's elected as a committee should have jurisdiction over that which they have responsibility for. And if they change the wording in the cemetery commission's verbiage to sole, I mean, that's really what it is. I don't think that it's necessary for the town manager, nor do I agree that she should be responsible for the day-to-day operation of the cemetery, because that's what you have the cemetery commissioners for. That's what you have the park commissioners for. Okay, and it just to me not right, and the building that is going up is being paid from subscriptions to buying graves. It's completely separate. I know that it's different and everything, but I think the bottom line is that if you're elected, you have custody and control of that which are assets of the commission.
So this section does say that.
No, it doesn't.
That they have the sole responsibility to make all the regulations and govern the care, supervise it, manage the public burial grounds.
Right.
The day-to-day care is the town manager. That has to be coordinated. So I'm going to go to Mr. Tyler and ask. What is typically a day-to-day care and maintenance? I'm gathering information. Sorry.
The day-to-day care is basically a maintenance issue, taking care of the grounds.
So is it mowing, leaves,
Plowing,
plowing?
any kind of maintenance activities involved with the cemeteries, cleaning, you know, like the leaves, grass, that's the day-to-day care and maintenance. But, you know, it could be said, well, the day-to-day care is also burials too, but the town manager is not in charge of burials, you know, the cemetery department is. So there's a lot of gray area there, what day-to-day care and maintenance is. But in our purpose, it's just a matter, if we don't have a problem with that line, we just want to make sure that any asset that we have, we're in control of it. That's simply.
No, go ahead, I'm just telling her I'll mention in a second. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Would you speak?
No, go ahead.
No, he's talking about you.
The day-to-day care includes a paid employee who's also a union employee under the supervision of the DPW. So it's a member of the bargaining unit who also does DPW-related activities. This is a sharing of resources for all the divisions under the DPW.
Can I ask, and once again, I am clueless at any things. Is the reason we are sharing employees is because there are budget concerns and we are trying to, do you know where I'm going with this? Okay, then I'm not going to say anything else.
Actually, I can read.
Please do.
I don't have an issue with the sole use of the cemetery use in that building. I think that the deed would supersede. Maybe the town moderator can answer that as legal attorney. But that is not the issue. I think that this concerns me for two reasons. In my opinion, this would be a gateway for the Cemetery Commission to separate from the DPW, which the benefit of having a DPW is the sharing of resources, which is a cost savings and creates greater efficiencies. Cooperation and collaboration should be the goal, not isolation. The second reason I am concerned about this is for fiscal reasons. The Cemetery Commission is in the process of building a new building on Holman Street, and to the best of my knowledge, did not inquire about the impact of adding this to the town's insurance, and has expressed they would like to purchase their own backhoe instead of using the current sharing of resources with the DPW. This will have financial implications for the town. The sale of cemetery lots will not sustain the maintenance of that building, nor the purchase of a new piece of equipment. There is approximately $77,000 in the sale of cemetery lots, and to give you an idea of revenues received annually, about $2,000 has been received to date since July. Separation of sharing of resources with the DPW will increase the cost to taxpayers.
Before we go further, Heather, can I ask you to send that to me? Because I'm not going to write it all down.
But thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Katie, then Mr. Luck.
Katie Adams, Williams Drive, commenting as a citizen. This particular part, if we went back to where we were before, where it says full jurisdiction, it's a very
658.
strong statement. And I remember talking about this when I was on the committee, full jurisdiction over use. Well, I just feel like you want to run down hypotheticals or scenarios, and I really liked Bob for that, because he would play off of those, like, you know, like what's an unintended consequence of saying somebody has full jurisdiction over use. Does that mean the town manager can close the town beach? Just because she decides so? Well, let me just go through my thought here, because it's just sort of, that's just one small example of going through every possible scenario, and then what does the town do? My town manager closed my town beach, I want to reopen it. How can I? Who's in charge? And so giving a huge amount of control to an employee, what are the unintended consequences of that? And not necessarily our current town manager, but any future town manager. What happens when the town manager has more power than the town? Or if the town wants to change the course of something the town manager is doing, they're not even an elected official. They may not even be a resident of the town. So giving a lot of power to an employee, did we run through every unintended consequence of a decision being made that the town disagrees with? How do they unravel that? Do they have any process to intervene in this concept of full jurisdiction over something? That's a very, very strong language. For example, and I spent a lot of time with the Cemetery Commission going to a meeting, talking to the DPW about this issue when I was on charter review. And I can see a lot of both sides of it. And what we just witnessed behind us here is an elected official and an employee having a disagreement over something, and the employee telling the elected official that they don't have jurisdiction over their thoughts and process of what they need. It's just, I feel like in government you always want to go with the side of the people and the democracy, and we're witnessing it here tonight. Who did the town place to be working for the cemeteries? That's Bill Tyler. And if we don't like what an elected official is doing, or we don't like their direction, then we change the elected official. And I'm not being specific, I'm not weighing in specifically with an opinion, I'm just saying that full jurisdiction going to an employee is very concerning to me. I'd like full jurisdiction to be with the people whenever possible.
Mr. Chair, I would only point out that that's not a change. Full jurisdiction has been in the charter, so if we make no changes to the charter, that stands.
All right, Mr. Luck, if you can keep your comments quickly, as we want to, I understand this is a lot of information, and we're getting it all in.
Yeah, I'll be quick as possible. I'll save a lot of speech by saying I agree with Dave Rogers on this issue. And I have a lot of personal experience, and there's been a lot of discussion with the town manager between the sewer commission. The sewer commission is I think, a good example of an issue. I mean, this one, but with the sewer commission one. It's an elected board. It is responsible for the sewer system. The sewer system is kind of unique in that all of that equipment was bought by the people. Wasn't bought with tax dollars. It was bought by the people who look to us to oversee and manage it. But the
Just
sewer
people on sewer.
But people on sewer. Sorry, thank you. So it's a bit of a unique situation, but has this broad brush that we have responsibility for policy and procedure but not the running of it. And I think there's a significant difference between being responsible and who does the work. I think you can achieve all of the benefits of leveraging town DPW and town employees and everyone else without being a responsible person. A responsible person doesn't have to do the work. If it makes sense for the DEP to do the work, then the DEP does the work. But the elected board should be able to decide who does the work. Because for the sewer commission, and it was, by charter, we wouldn't be able to do this. It was done cooperatively with the DPW manager, thank God. We decided to outsource it, that there was disadvantage to using DPW. And when we outsourced it, we reduced the costs significantly to our customers. We don't have the power to decree that, to say that we are going to outsource it. It's got to be a negotiation. And if the town doesn't, the town manager and DPW don't want to do it the most effective way, they have no control over that. So I think there's a very fundamental problem here, that these elected commissions need to have more control over what they're responsible for to the voters and to their customers.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir? No, right there.
Go ahead,
All right.
my friend.
All right, make it very quick.
I really take objection to this, and I'm going to tell you why.
Why?
This is a very important document, okay? And the fact of the matter is, because the lights go out at 10 o'clock, or you haven't scheduled enough hearings for this, should not be construed, if I could, as something we have to move this along. If the people have something to say, I think that we should be able to say
But on the
this.
flip side, if we start saying the same things over and over again, we've made the case, Heather has made a case, you've made a case, I have presented your case, we've had several opinions. I think we've had lots of discussion. I have been to many cemetery commission meetings. We've discussed it several times in public hearings. It has been done. I would like to also make sure that we get to everything so that when we meet next week, we can vote on many of these things or ask people to come to our meeting so that we can get more information. So I'm going to ask this, sir.
Sir, I'm
you
not
have
done.
something to say. I'm cutting you off right now. I'm going to ask this gentleman to finish his statement.
I'll relinquish my time if you'd like to speak.
You know,
If that's what you want to do, please let him finish.
This is unbelievable. It truly is unbelievable. I was going to say to you, sir, that the fact that you said something about the charter and that it wouldn't be moved. We're here to review the charter, the old and the new.
I was simply pointing out.
I understand what you were pointing out.
It exists in.
It doesn't. Just because it exists doesn't make it right. That's why we're doing this. Okay, the reason, I'll give you a little history from somebody that hasn't lived here, and I have for 40 years. This whole process was done because they thought that people didn't do anything in the cemetery department in the winter and the parks department, so they were going to look for the DPW so that they could share resources. It hasn't worked, okay? The fact of the matter is it has not worked, okay? And it should have been able to work, but it hasn't. So all they have to do is cooperate and get things done. I do not support, nor anybody with their right mind would support buying a backhoe for the cemetery department. Worst case, if the DPW doesn't do it, for some reason you could hire 2 or 3 contractors like they used to do years ago. So there is a subliminal undercurrent here that people don't want to accept or discuss. And let me just tell the last thing. I really take exception to when a person of the town wants to say something and they're pushed around and only have 3 minutes or 10 minutes for public speaking. This isn't right. This is America, and this is a very important document. Good evening. Thank you, sir.
I guess I've let my time go by.
Did you want to say something about the cemetery?
Clarence Ward, 720 Goodrich Street. My interpretation of what Mr. Tyler wants to do is just reaffirm the ownership of the property. We got a deed there. He just wants it exempt from being used for something else 20 years down the line or whatever. I thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
I would be interested in hearing what, at least somebody from the Parks Commission is here to see what their thoughts are on this elected subject and control over those properties, if you don't mind.
Mr. Levesque. Yeah. Karen Bernard, now.
I realize you're one
That's okay.
representative,
That's
one
okay.
person, and it's just your personal.
Yeah, representing Parks Commission now. So we have not talked about this, so my opinion is going to be based on what we have talked about in the past and things related to this. Parks was put under DPW a number of years ago for a whole slew of reasons. There are some things that have worked great, and there are other things that have not worked great. The daily care and maintenance has worked well, for the most part, under the DPW. What I can say when I read this is that, along the lines of what Ms. Adams said, when you're renting out our facilities, or you take that day-to-day stuff and think that it's your right to close something down when Parks may want it opened, you're crossing a line there, and I'm not sure this addresses that. We have a good administration right now, but that doesn't mean this is what it's going to look like 5 years from now, and this document's still going to be in place 5 years from now. It concerns me when somebody else has full jurisdiction over the rental and use of something that falls under another commission, whether it be Parks or whatever, because a Parks Commission could sit here and say, we want to have a 90-foot diamond stay open for baseball in town, the Chestnut Street field. But what happens if our town manager or our DPW director, who's handling the current day-to-day care and maintenance, decides they're not going to care for it? And now they're going to turn it into something else, even though that's not what we wanted. It does take away a piece of our ability to do what we have been elected to do. But I'm not sure I think some thought needs to be put in to how it can be worded. It's not something that I thought about prior today, because I didn't think about it. I was looking at something else. So I think this is a subject or a topic, these few lines, that I would hope you'd continue in your next meeting to see if there's something that maybe can be slightly worded differently.
So, as I've said to the cemetery department many times, and I think Paul will say it, send us what you think. No. But she says, will the commission come up with the wording? Our purpose is to look at the charter and to manipulate it to fit the town right now. Sometimes we do some rewording, and often we ask people, how would you like to have it reworded, and then we modify from there. If you have an issue with this section, please send me, like Bill did.
As a resident, I will say that when I read this, I'm not reading it just as a Parks Commissioner holding an elected position. I'm reading that now as a resident looking at multiple boards. So I guess Parks doesn't meet again until sometime in February. So I can personally sit down and I can hope that our other commissioners see this and also think to send you something as well of what their ideas may be. But when I said maybe you guys could think about it, because I'm just thinking about it as multiple boards, not just as Parks
Well, we need
or
something to
cemetery.
start with.
So, okay.
If you have an
That's very
idea,
nice.
you need to send it to us. We are looking at 1,100 lines. And as you know, there are red lines and blue lines and
Brown lines.
brown lines too. And I will even backtrack that when we began this process, I don't know who was responsible for talking to the Parks Department. There was someone who had that was you.
And I will be forthcoming in that Parks has been in a state of change for the past number of years. We have been just treading water, and I feel like we're just getting above water to start to swim. So this is not something that has been front and center for us.
Okay.
So it's not something, Mr. Erickson did come to us multiple times, and I'm actually here tonight hoping that there's going to be a public comment section to request something of you folks.
We did have that.
You can do that now.
Well, you can do
Okay,
that
so let me
now.
do that now.
It-
So the Parks Commission met this evening, and we would like to formally request that the Parks Commission be changed from a 3 to a 5-member board, following the same format as, say, the Board of Health in terms of how that's laid out in the election of officers or
So I'm
commissioners.
going to ask you to do this.
Yep.
Can you email us that, email me, I suppose, I'm the guy that you have to email, the request and the wording?
Sure thing.
And if you could give me numbers wherever the documents on the
I will.
website with numbers,
I will.
3, 5 members. And we will, and can you give us the reasons why? And then we will meet and vote on that. Which is why we're having public hearings and we have public meetings, is to get the input from the public. And that's what we are here to do. And there are many times when there's no one in the public.
We
And-
watch from home. Let me assure you.
Okay,
We watch from
but
home.
we don't get the input is what we need.
We
This-
can't
this
see
is
the
what-
resume.
We can't, you know, I have my opinions on what I'd like to change, but I want to know what your opinions are, and as a committee, we discuss all those opinions, and try to make the document the best that we can. Will it be perfect? I doubt it, because nothing in this world at this point can be with the amount of change
So
that
I
we
will
have.
go through and I will see what I can do in terms of
That would be excellent.
coming up with some, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it doesn't get changed, I don't know. But that is my concern when I read full jurisdiction, that somebody's going to be able to undermine, overmine, I don't know what the word would be, a decision that Parks has made, because they're the ones that have the ultimate control of rental
And
use.
if I
and
may,
things.
and I've been going on a limb all day, all night.
When you feel something is not being done, I'm going to ask, is it select person, what is the process? The parks, I'll use your
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, so
And
if
I'm not-
something doesn't get done, who will
All
do
right.
it?
There's something that's not getting done, you've already talked to the town manager, and you feel, whoever you talk to, what is the process? Is it listed in here, or is it a process that we use in the town? I'm going to ask Phyllis or Jamie.
I think you start with the Parks Commission.
Right, if something's
So,
not,
but
all right,
if the
but if the
Parks
Parks
Commission-
Commission
If
is
we have
having
a
an issue,
grievance,
where
who
do
do
they
we
go?
go?
an issue. Where
But
they
re-
go?
remember, we're an elected board, so
Yeah.
this is where a lot of the stuff comes in. Because we're elected, nobody's above us.
You're a legal-
Whereas the Parks
Well-
Commission is as equal as, Jamie and Phyllis and Heather and Tanner and everybody else. We're just, elected is elected.
Right, and the school committee operates the same way. They have,
But I think the issue
Oh,
is, I'm sorry, I don't mean
Go
to
ahead,
interrupt
no,
you.
go, please.
But I think the issue that presents itself is that all of those elected bodies do not have their own staff.
Correct.
So if there's an issue, they go through the town manager. They don't have a person to call who belongs to them. So I think that's also one of the places where some of the issues come up. That's my guess. So, which I don't know how that would work, but, like it's one of those things that.
But the town manager manages a fair number of employees that support the whole town and all these functions. And she's a professional
I am not, oh, believe
who
me.
manages all that.
Yeah,
And all the elected bodies have the ability to go to the town manager and request the resources they need to deliver their mandate.
right.
I mean, I get offended when I hear all this talk about power, and it's not power, it's get the job done.
No, I'm not even coming at it.
No,
from
but
that point of
we're
view.
not talking about power, we're talking about, you have a mandate, you set the policies, you drive what the goals are, and if you don't have the right number of resources, you lobby to get them to the town at town meeting. The best vehicle to do that is through the budget process, which happens to be managed by the town manager, because we hired her and pay her a good deal of money to help us see the big picture.
Jamie?
Now, when each of these functions go out by themselves and buy a piece of equipment or deal with the maintenance of a facility or want to control their half of an employee, that's when we see inefficiencies and it costs the town money.
Can I just point something out on that, Jamie, too, is that, first of all, you guys are the ones, charter's using the word full jurisdiction. It's not me saying somebody has power that they shouldn't have, and this is what the charter gives them. But I'm not talking about things, for me, my comments aren't things that are budget related. They're not something that I would go to the town manager to bring to the town. I've worked with her on stuff like that. I'm talking about this 657, 658 is giving full jurisdiction over the rental and use. Let's just stick to those two words.
Based on your policies. You
No.
set the direction, yes.
It can be subject to written policies, but there may be no written policies on something, and you've given her full jurisdiction over
Then
something.
you need to come up with the policies.
And we can, but I'm, you know, we're never gonna be able to cover everything.
That's correct.
So it's, when I look at that, it just gives me a little bit of hesitation to say, you know, as an elected official, I'm here for something too. And I also have to remind you, this is our current administration. We have seen other towns go to hell in a handbag because their town administrator is horrible and they've removed that person. Hopefully, we never get in that situation. But if we do and we've given them full jurisdiction, they're not going to be in the wrong. That's my comments on that, and I will forward that on to
If
you.
you look at the entire document, there are all kinds of ways of mitigating all kinds of things. This is one particular section. If you look at the entire document, there are policies on who to go to, what to do. Elected officials are basically guidelines and, what's the other word? See, I'm used to using school committee. Policy and guidelines. That's what they do. And you know, we have a town, hold on a second, let me finish. We went to town manager representation, town manager, that's our CEO. And I always, since I was a school employee, look at it as the superintendent is hired and does all the grunt work. The school committee does not say to the superintendent, we want to see, I don't know.
No, we don't do maintenance. That's all. We govern, make policies, the budget, and hire the superintendent.
Right.
And they do all the
Now,
day-to-day maintenance.
if some parent comes to you and says, my classroom
We
is
have a policy
filthy.
and a procedure
Then they go to-
and that they go through.
Right.
But
There's
we
a
have
cha-
no jurisdiction
We do
over
not
that.
have
You
jurisdiction.
can't, but you can suggest to the superintendent that they check that.
No.
You can pass it along.
Well, we pass it down and then
Right.
they pass it even.
So, and I'm just doing this because this is ramifications for everyone. So the superintendent ignores your request, the classroom is filthy, and over time, eventually
Then we would hear it.
you would hear it,
Yeah.
and then the superintendent would be reprimanded, so to speak, for not doing their job.
Okay.
So there are, and I'm using this as an example because I did teach, there's a give and take. You are a board, you are not involved in any of the day-to-day. You do hear about day-to-day operations, and you can suggest to the superintendent, but you've hired a CEO to run that. And see, I'm thinking, as a town manager, we have a CEO. She, at the moment, has jurisdiction. She can give that power. She can say, I'm going to have you take care of the Parks Department for me.
The school committee's different though, because the superintendent is employed by the school committee.
Correct.
They hire and fire her.
Yeah.
As an elected Parks Commissioner, I don't hire nor ever desire to fire Heather. So it's
Okay, I see
not
your
the
point.
same. But I did want to point out that,
Yes.
yes, you are right that policies and procedures are things that Parks Commission does as well as cemetery, but there's other things that are, especially the Board of Health as well, that are governed by Mass General Law, and there's specific requirements that come through that not everybody's always aware of. Parks Commission can be our own tree warden. We can hire a police force. There's other things that come into play. It's not just about policy and procedure all the time. There are sometimes, yeah, absolutely, and there's other times that it's not. So I think we've probably beaten this dead horse on this subject because I think that, you know, some of us will go back and be able to give you some more input on what our thoughts are. At least let us think it out and put it in writing, and if they're accepted, great, at least they'll be considered.
Right, and that's what I'm looking for tonight, is to get all this down. I'm going to defer to Paul, and then I'll go to Katie. Go ahead, Paul.
I just,
Bill?
just real quickly, I wanted to respond to the town manager's statement, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that this submission of ours is in no way, shape, or form an attempt to separate from anybody. This is just an issue of deeded rights to land and what it's used for, and like I said, 30, 40 years from now, we want to make sure that according to the deed, that's what the land is used for. There's no nefarious plot to separate. I mean, as far as Karen said, some of the things work, some of the things don't work, but that's a different issue. When the three departments were all put under one umbrella, I understand why it was done. It was efficiency, but it doesn't always work. There's all kinds of gray areas. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But again, that's a different issue. But I just want to make sure that this is not some plot to separate from anybody.
Okay. Thank you very much. Katie?
Okay. Oops, thanks, Bill. So subject to written policies, obviously something that's being added in the brown category.
Actually, we voted it in.
Right, so it's not currently there, I guess I'm going to simply try to say.
It's something new. It's part of the...
Correct. So since it's something new, I guess what I'm thinking with all this discussion is in that portion lies the opportunity to further define subject to written policies. So to have full jurisdiction, subject to written policies provided by whom and how.
Okay.
And I think that's what's missing with cemetery or parks, or somebody that wants to look for sort of a red flag in a scenario where they see a hypothetical problem with full jurisdiction over rental or use, subject to written policies provided by parks, cemeteries, provided how and where. I feel like I'm missing
And
what...
once again, I'm going to say, can we have some wording?
Well, I think the wording is, the commission is here to write it and provide it. We're here in a public hearing to give opinions and input.
Okay.
And I think I'm trying to give wording in a very generic way, just as a part of a member of the public participating.
You just want clarification on where and who the policies are.
I think the opportunity is to clarify there and then make people feel more comfortable that it's called out, that there are opportunities for a halt in the full jurisdiction.
Essentially, a subject to written policies by elected commissions.
Yeah, if you...
i.e. parks,
You like that?
cemeteries.
Exactly, like if you enhance that wording a little like you just did,
Okay,
it
wait.
makes you really feel more comfortable.
6:57.
Yeah, right. Exactly what Tim said.
Subject to written policies by elected commissions.
Because that wording to me, when I read that again, to have full jurisdiction subject to written policies, who's writing the policies? If I write a policy that says the cemetery building can be used for rents of, I don't know, local restaurants, does Heather have to enforce that? Do you know what I mean? So I think we have the opportunity now to expand on that piece of it set forth by parks. We'll make the written policies for the rental and use. Just clarify who that is.
So, subject to written policies by appropriate?
Elected officials who have
Just by elected
jurisdiction
commissions?
over
Okay, got it. There we go.
And then we can wordsmith further next week.
Okay, so I have that down as a note. If it is okay with everyone, I will move on.
I don't have any to review with.
Okay. Providing more specifics in the process for removal and suspension of the town manager, that's basically 723. What happened, I believe, the original charter did not include the town manager, the right of process. Mr. Murphy, help me, what was it?
Well, just that she didn't have a right to have a hearing and to, be represented by counsel or anything like that.
Right.
It was not, she didn't have any rights if she was going to be terminated, so I think we needed to build that in.
So informally, I just wanted to mention that what we did is we included that the town manager has rights as an individual to be represented by counsel, to have a hearing and all that, and that's the only thing that was added there, was to give the rights to the town manager, which was not in the original document. Does that make sense to people?
better not happen, because I'm not moderating that.
Yeah. 9 is basically was all the purple stuff to make grammatical phrasing changes that doesn't really alter. Does anyone have any comments on the commission on any of that in the charter? I left that open in case someone found something. A great example would be the what we just talked about with the mandate. Does anyone in the have a no? Thought that might happen. 10, clarify references, days to refer to standard calendar day. I'm going to go to the planning board. I have a note that you were going to find out if we needed to change the number of days of something to make it work better, worst case scenario.
I'll bring it up at the next meeting.
Okay, can you get that to me? Is that something I can get soon? Okay.
We haven't had it.
What we decided to do, just as a public record again, there were a lot of mentions in the charter about 1 month, 20 days, but there was no definition anywhere. Did that include holidays, not include holidays? So we looked at that and decided to include and add a definition. I'm sorry for going quickly, right there. Day or days refer to standard calendar days unless otherwise specified. Now, Mr. Murphy, you had your question, which I think, did we answer that?
Yeah, I guess that adds to it. Clarifies.
Does it need to be clarified, in your opinion?
That should be it.
I think that's good enough. I mean, we could wordsmith forever, but that's good.
Oh, well, that's it.
That's good enough.
Okay, well then, we're going to leave that in. We changed all the months to 30-day equivalents. It just seemed easier to make everything 30 days sort of numbers, and I want to thank Jim for correcting all my... I copied and pasted, and obviously
Years in finance.
incorrectly copied and pasted all the numbers.
Years in mortgage.
Jim, can I ask, you had brought up moving this section around and moving line 107, just moving those around. Is that something that we could take up later?
Yeah, I mean, all I was thinking is moving the definitions up further into the
Not changing
beginning of the
anything,
document.
but just moving the
Moving
order
the
around?
section.
So if it's okay with you, is that something we can
Yes.
just look at, discuss quickly? Okay.
It's cosmetic.
I know you said that if the town clerk, line 210, if it's appointed, we need to revisit that language. We've already discussed, we would have to revisit that language anyway. Sorry it goes by fast.
Well, because line 210 says that there's a failure to elect. So if
Right.
we change it to an appointed, then we got to kind of...
Right, but that's something that's wordsmithing again, depending on what we decide to do with the town clerk. And we are going to present pros and cons. We don't want anyone to get nervous about that. And that's going to be a town meeting vote, I believe. Is that correct? Am I speaking
Yes.
correctly, Commission? Give me nods, thank you. Town moderator, we did your concerns with holidays and line 570 referring to names and names.
So in the,
Yep.
if you do the changing the town clerk thing, can you put like a little add in, adjust anything in the charter that would need to be changed as a result? So you don't have to go back? You know, like that particular one.
We need to identify where all those references are so that we can mark them appropriately, so that however the town votes, then we can make the changes without going, we forgot one.
Right now, they're all,
Yeah,
right now, they're all buried under red.
Right now, they're
Right,
buried.
So we might have to do like red with a yellow highlight. Or something, a different color highlight for each of these controversial ones that we want to put in a warrant, so that we can at least
Yeah,
easily
and
identify.
that's something we're going to have to discuss, how we present this material, which hopefully by after the February 27th public hearing, we will then comprise a final document. So we need to think of how that's going to look for the public to make it easy. Well, I know we're going to have pros and cons. We need to have probably a document that, a separate document that says these are the controversial changes, and you can refer to the original document, that kind of thing. But that's a formatting thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we have like 5 substantial changes, or whatever the number is, that we use different color highlights for
Okay.
each. one throughout the document. So-
Chair, could I ask
Oh,
one question?
yes,
One
please.
question. It's in regards to the town clerk changes that you had proposed in here. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be because I went through this very quickly a number of weeks ago. The section that speaks to the duties of the town clerk, were those intended to be removed from the charter if?
No, actually, I don't know if you were here when we discussed that quite at length, that would, does it have to be removed from the charter if it becomes appointed? Does it stay, but does it need to be moved from the elected section? And one of the things I have to do is try to find out from council if the town clerk becomes appointed and salaried, is it union or non-union? We had quite a discussion about that earlier.
I apologize.
No, that's fine, because this way here, you can go back and look at the tape and you can see that entire discussion. I have to note, looking at 999, or actually it's also at 1195, it's the same thing twice. At the end, the write-ins for minimum, sorry for going so fast, here we go. This is actually in twice for some reason. We had this discussion at our last meeting, and I think we tabled voting on that, correct, Mark? The minimum votes. It failed.
I want to say we voted 2 meetings ago. I think that's what happened. We
Right.
voted 2 meetings ago.
So
We
this
did not
section
vote
should be
last
taken
meeting.
out.
Well, I thought, and correct me
We
if I'm wrong,
voted.
we talked about, and I think the last meeting we talked about,
I'm going to go to the other
There's
spot.
a long discussion about
is it a number or is it a percentage?
Well,
Right.
And I don't think we actually voted on
We
Well,
didn't,
we voted.
a number or percentage.
we
No,
didn't,
we voted 2 meetings ago and it failed because you and Heather
We
weren't
weren't
at the
there.
meeting.
And
So
we
we
don't know how you
couldn't
would've voted
achieve
anyway,
a supermajority.
Okay.
And then at the last meeting,
So you voted,
discussed it in detail.
did you vote, well, 2 meetings ago, did you vote to exclude it from the
No.
document? Okay.
Voted to
2 meetings
include it,
ago, I
and
have
it
the,
failed.
I have the minutes.
Okay.
Mark?
We had 5 in favor, 2 nays. Tanner and Terry were opposed, but we did not have a supermajority.
we didn't have 6. It would have had to have 6 votes yes to include.
So we talked about it last time, but we didn't vote one way or another to include it or exclude it.
So
That's
this
correct.
section,
Okay.
We said that we would table it until we had a full body.
Okay. And I know last time we talked about a number versus a percentage and what the threshold was, but I don't believe we took a vote on whether or not to include that. I think we went
Not
back
at the
to
last
think
meeting.
about numbers.
Yes, I watched the last meeting, we talked about
Okay,
our intention.
so-
I did too. And I said,
officially, this section is not, hasn't even been, as a board, we have not even recommended to include it.
correct.
We
From
said
my
last time
recollection.
It requires more discussion.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to discuss this. So I'm going to play that weird card and say, does anyone have a specific comment they would like to make about this section so we can include it in our discussions next time? Please, Mr. Pesios.
Very brief comment. As a citizen, I hope that you vote not to include this at all. I believe that if somebody gets a vote and is willing to fill the position, then they should be allowed to fill the position. We have enough trouble running this town with the limited number of people that we have come forward to do it now. I don't think we should limit it any further for this reason. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for stating that clearly and concisely.
I have a short statement as well on that.
Sure.
Do I need to state my name again? Karen Menard, 672 Page Street. My concern with this section is you've added in there, elected unless they receive a number of votes at least equal to the number of signatures. I think that should be equal to the number of votes that would be required to get them appointed if the seat was to remain
I
open.
think we discussed that. We did a lot of discussion about the numbers, whether to go with 10, to go with, what is the current, because of the last election?
52?
52. That number changes every
Correct, it does.
gubernatorial.
But I will counter that and go back to the discussion that I obviously wasn't there for, that Parks Commission, 2 years in a row, or within 2 times in the last 3 years, had to appoint somebody. That person was appointed by a total of, this last one, 7 votes. So if that's the case, why are we talking 52, even anything above 7?
That was our discussion.
So,
Go ahead, Phyllis. I'll let you.
The reason is, the 7 votes that are given when you appoint someone. It's in an open session, is an agenda ahead of time, so everyone knows that this person is coming before the board. They are, the people that are choosing are elected by the people to represent them. If me and 3 of my friends decide we're gonna write somebody in, we just go to the ballot and we write them in, and no one has a chance to say, hey, I don't want.
that's not always the case though, because Mr. Manoni, who is currently sitting with me, was a write-in with a very small number of votes that he solicited for. Years ago, I went for a write-in for a library trustee. I also solicited those votes, as did somebody else, in a public, basically a public forum. I didn't do it in secret. It was done open where people knew that I was soliciting them. It concerns me that we're going to say 50 votes or whatever the number is for that year, when then we're going to turn around and say, but these 7 people, and you're right, we are elected, and most of the time. However, in the case of parks, we have an appointed member who's not elected. So saying that everybody is elected and going to make that choice if we have an open seat, that's not necessarily the case, because if we lost somebody right now, if Parks lost somebody right now, say we lost Mr. Manoni, that leaves myself and Susanna. Susanna is an appointed position on Parks right now.
But
nobody else voted for her other than the 7 people that voted her in.
Another important point is they only serve until the next election.
Yep.
If someone's a write-in, they serve the whole term.
Yeah.
So that's a big differentiator. And the number 52, 53 is the same number of votes as you would need if you wanted to be put on the
No, I
ballot.
understand. I'm just saying, that's my, if I was looking at this, that's my opinion on why I think we should not be looking at a minimum number, that we should be looking at the number of votes that it would take to get that person appointed. And do it as the average. So Parks only has 3, but school committee has 5, or whatever school committee has.
But you're totally ignoring the fact
When
that.
we first speak, she hasn't even spoken one word tonight. I would like to hear what she has to say.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Marie.
Thank you very much.
Marie Birchfield.
Oh, I'm sorry. Marie Birchfield, 1 Rose Garden Lane, Emerald Place.
Got it.
Okay? I'm very nervous. I disagree with any kind of a number. I'm a firm believer that my husband served 20 years in the military so that everybody had the right to vote, and their vote should count if that's what they wanted to do. The person, if it's a write-in vote and they get enough votes to be seated, they have the right to say yay or nay. We are in a town where 50 registered voters can open town meeting, hold a whole day of meetings with making decisions for a whole town of 11,312 residents. I did my homework. 8,012 are registered voters as of right now. Town elections, I couldn't get the town meeting numbers yet. I will.
Well, look at me, did Kathy Herrick's go?
No, you run it, so you do. On May 6th, May of 2016, 726 town people went and decided everything on your ballot for 11,312 residents. In May of 17, 584 went. 518, May of 2018, was a good year. You got 1,201 votes. I have the numbers for registered voters in May of 17 was 7,620. In May of 2018, it was 7,799. I'm not good at percentages, and Terry was too busy to do them for me. So you all are on your own. But that's my vote on my statement as a citizen of Lunenburg, and I love Lunenburg.
Thank you very much. Mr. Locke?
Yeah, this is a great discussion, and these are really good inputs, and I agree, and I absolutely agree that the right to vote is a very valuable thing, and we need to protect that. And one of the reasons that I think this is important is because in write-in votes, unless they are well advertised and they're soliciting votes, which a lot of people do, which is great, and I condemn them, whatever that word.
Condone?
Yeah. Congratulate them on doing it the right way and being upfront and, putting the word out so people know what's going on. But there are some people in this town that are and have used the process in a secret way. And 3 people have shown up with a certain agenda, written someone in that no one got a chance to vote on. No one even knew those people were running. And you get the person that they wanted. And I think that's, I'm afraid that the reason for this, and that was one of the questions that keeps coming up, why is this even important? Why was this even proposed? What's the problem, right, that would have this great thing? And I just take a few minutes, but I think it's important for people to know why this is, and if they don't think that's important, then it's fine. Just you can move on. But in April, I submitted this following thing to the Charter Commission to try to address that question, and I quote here: "To address your important question of why and what the history is, it would avoid a situation that has occurred twice within the past 5 years in this town." I can find my glasses. There's a situation that occurred twice within the last 5 years where a person who was not interested in running was written in by a handful of citizens who I understand had intentions to disrupt the town or the town boards by electing the unsuspecting resident. On these 2 occasions, the person was elected and served based on 11 votes the first time and 3 votes the second time. It is worthy of note that this person already had a reputation of disrupting 2 prior boards in town they had previously served on, and resigned prior to the expiration of their term on the 11-vote commission. That was provided back then. And I was very sensitive to the person and trying not to get into anything. It's an example of something that happened, and therefore it can happen again.
I
It
have a
happened.
question for you in
Yes.
regards to those situations. There was no one running for that position?
Yeah,
at
it's
that time,
exactly
correct?
what this would apply
So
to.
that would have been an empty position?
Yes, which would have then
So
gone
we would have
to,
had nobody elected, and we would have had to appoint
yes,
someone to this position?
correct.
In open session.
Correct. In a talent bank form, Matt, where we don't have
Can
any
I
talent bank
finish my
form, is that
comment,
correct?
please? Because you don't have the whole story yet.
Okay, I'm
Just-
just trying to make sure
Yeah,
I
and
understand
you're
that
right.
no one ran against them.
No,
No,
there was no
This is
no
the only
one
thing.
at caucus, the person didn't want to run. He had no intention of running. He was written in,
But then he could have declined it.
He could
correct?
absolutely.
but he
Don't
didn't.
get sworn.
But he didn't. In this example, he did not. He chose not to. He said, okay, I'm in. He had already been on 2 other boards, so I suspect he would not have got elected had he run. However, as this information obviously doesn't seem to have addressed your concern, I'd like to provide some additional information now. In the first 11-vote term of this candidate, or non-candidate, in spite of their good intentions, issues developed within the board, and he resigned within 1 year. In their second 3-vote term, this person had again disrupted the board, including bringing open meeting law complaints against the board, that was refuted by the town council, and after appeal by the member, the Attorney General's office, it was ruled that no violation had occurred. All this at considerable cost to the town and disruption to the board. Being sensitive to the individual involved, who I believe acted in good faith and wanted to help the town. I'm just very sensitive to get any more details on that. I would have to in any other format. But these are real life examples of what can happen. I think when the majority of the time people do it right, they go solicit votes, it's known to the public. If it's known to the public, then somebody can say, wait a minute, I want to do my own write-in campaign and get write-ins. The number is an issue, and as Selectman Luck said, it's basically based on the state. There's a state law provision for write-in votes, and that is the criteria they use. They use 1% of the electorate. It's not sacred, but it's also not arbitrary. And maybe there's another number that will be palatable to people. But I would also argue that a good candidate that's willing to do the hard work that all these commissions require, they can they can take out papers, which requires 53 votes, 53 signatures. So it's
We'll get nominated.
Or get they can get nominated caucus, which is
I agree.
eventually they can do those
Town
things.
government.
Or they can have a write-in campaign, as people in this room have, and got a ton of votes when they are public, and then but the visibility is there. And
So, Mr. Luck,
yes,
I'm not cutting you off.
I'm going to go with that.
We have your information. If you could re-email that to me, so I have it in my documents. We are still discussing that entire thing. We spent, I believe, 45 minutes discussing that item at our last meeting. We've heard your side. We're hearing. Do you have anything to add that is different than what we've been hearing in the last few minutes?
Can I just
Well,
add one?
I'm looking at Katie right now because she has the microphone.
Sure, I guess I'll just add one example, and I don't think you want to try to control democracy. In this case, you just want to let it happen. And the way you could prevent a problem is by encouraging participation. So if you're worried about write-ins, just encourage participation. That would have a healthier outcome. But my main point that I came up with listening to the idea of somebody being disruptive, you could have somebody voted in with 2,000 votes and be the most disruptive, disgruntled, and problematic person ever to hold an office. So the amount of votes that get you there doesn't interpret the amount of success or positive participation you'll have.
Ms. Menard.
And I just want to, I know everybody here is aware of it, but anybody that decides to tune in at home, there's multiple opportunities to fill a ballot spot on a ballot.
Yeah.
You can go to caucus in March and get your name on, or you can pull papers and put your name on. If nobody does either one of those, that spot, whether our choice or not our choice, is left open. And it's left open for a name to be written in. And I agree with Marie that if I had to put a number there, I'd be telling you I'd want it to be whatever the average is of what it takes to get appointed. I'd rather see no number there, because I think that regardless of why somebody's voting for somebody, it's their right. It's also their right to say, I don't want to take this position. And it doesn't matter, elected, appointed, otherwise. I joined Parks Commission, and within 2 meetings, one of the former people had resigned. And, I don't know why, but he chose to resign, and it happens. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I agree with it.
At this
He agrees.
point,
I'm giving this to you, so nobody.
I am going to show you that there is plenty of time for more comments. We have a meeting on the 23rd, the 13th at the Ritter. The 27th, I already have the town hall booked for a public hearing. I would prefer, though, everyone, to send us your comments and your thoughts ahead of time. One of the issues we're going to run into is after the 27th, we have to create the warrant for town meeting. And that means we have to dot our i's, cross our t's, and figure out what we're going to do. It is very difficult to make major changes at that point. This is a year and a half into this. We've had lots of opportunities for public comments, and I appreciate them all. And it's good to hear them again. We have lots of information here that we're going to process. I will be sending some things out to people, and some people are going to send me some things too, so that they don't get lost. And I do want to thank you for your help. Your comments have been heard. As a board, we're going to go home. I'm assuming most of us are going to think through some of these things, and we will try to come up with a document that best reflects the town of Lunenburg. It will not be perfect, but we will try to get it close. At this point, I would ask the commission to reach out to their appointed people to make sure there is nothing that I would not like to have something on Wednesday, April 24th. Oh, by the way. So if you could, in the next week or so, reach out to your commissions, just double check that there's nothing out there. I want to thank everyone for coming and spending the time. Thank you, audience, for listening. And I would love to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Adjourn.
Discussion.
No discussion.
Well, you know.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? I want to thank everyone. Thank you very much. We'll see you on the 23rd at the Ritter. All right.